And a very good morning to you. Welcome along to Thursday morning's OTBAM. We are just days away from the All-Ireland football final, where Dublin will be crowned the second equal or the greatest football team of all time with 4 wins in a row if they manage to do it. It's the weirdest build-up to an All-Ireland football final that I can ever remember, in that there is almost no interest in it from casual fans, from neutrals. People trying to drum up a bit of support for Tyrone, a bit of kind of, oh, there are stories here, this is a really interesting group, look at the Mickey Hart thing. It's an amazing achievement to get back to this place that they've got back to. And everybody else is like, meh.
Well, the thing is, we never know what's going to happen with Tyrone. We don't know what's going to happen in Dublin 117, Tyrone 11 points on Sunday. We just don't know. Anything could possibly happen in that scenario. The fact is, time is a strange thing. It allows thoughts to fester in our mind which are completely ridiculous. And one of those thoughts is Tyrone winning on Sunday.
How do they do it?
Well, that's the thing. These thoughts are based on complete irrelevant ideas, such as hunger, such as famine, such as drought in Tyrone, and the ferocity that came from them losing to Dublin last year, despite the fact that they lost in miserable fashion, showing up the fact that there is a humongous gulf between these two teams.
What if they start a fight early and get 4 dubs sent off somehow?
Well, that would be a start, but Dublin will probably have a plan to exploit that space. It's just the 4 dubs who get sent off, and Tyrone are still at 15. Oh, well, in that case, they've got every chance. I didn't even think of that outcome.
Well, like, how many men did Dublin have to get sent off before this is like an even 50-50 game? 12 apostles, was that enough to see the match out? You have to assume if Dublin get 3 lads sent off, then the referee at some point is going to even it up a little bit and at least send off one of the Tyrone lads.
Yeah.
So 14-12, is that... Do you...
Well, the thing is that the cliche last year was that it worked in Dublin's favour, having both teams down to 14 after the Donny Vaughan moment of madness. Obviously, 15-14 would have been far more beneficial to Mayo, clearly. But when the lower you get in numbers and the more space there is in the pitch, the more Dublin exploit it. But of course, if you've got more men in the pitch, if it's just Dublin receiving these hypothetical red cards, then of course it gives Tyrone an advantage. I would say 2 Dublin men getting sent off and Tyrone have a massive advantage.
Yeah, okay. The fact that Dublin are like a younger team, a younger starting team than they have been in recent years, more than likely if the team that starts the semis, say, there's a bunch of young lads in there, is there some room for the wise heads of Tyrone, the trash talking, the mobile phone numbers on the arms, that kind of stuff?
Well, the mobile phone numbers on the arms, this is a Tyrone of decades past. That is the Ryan McMenamin era. Like, what evidence do we have to suggest that is actually part of the new Tyrone psyche? What have we seen that this Tyrone team has any bit of a harder edge than the Mayo or Kerry teams that Dublin have come up against? Even the Donegal team that Dublin came up against in Croke Park this year, which is a bigger comparison that we should be making than the game in Omagh. And I think a lot of people will agree with that because of the venue and all that sort of stuff. I don't see where this sort of level of craziness that comes in the ruthless stakes is going to come from, because Tyrone just aren't that team anymore. They aren't the team of Ricey and co.
No, but maybe they can summon the ghost somehow, somewhere.
Well, maybe Ricey's in the dressing room this week, that, like, giving them tips. Number 1, find the mobile phone number of somebody close to your man. And number 2, get a permanent marker. And number 3, write it on your forearm. And then, shove it in your opponent's face when you're 5 points down, and somehow you might be able to make a comeback. I don't know, the thing is, everybody's saying, well, there's not much of a build-up to this. But I do think that there is kind of the thing we always see in All-Ireland final week, the general seeping of an idea that the underdog can win.
Yeah, okay, well, we're going to try and find out exactly how, if you were involved in the opposition camp this week, you might go about trying to beat the Dubs. Lee Keegan obviously has been very close to it. Eamon Fitzmaurice didn't get the opportunity to put it into practice this year, the lessons that he's learned over the last couple of years, so they're both going to join us to give us their prescription for how you actually beat the Dubs and what they've done in the past that might have put the Dubs off a little bit over the course of 70/80 minutes in these games. That's coming up around about 8:15. The All Blacks, you discovered in your wide reading of the New Zealand media, a new voice, somebody who we feel needs to get a platform.
Yeah, just hand the Webb Ellis Trophy to the New Zealand Now. Read a little tab in the front of the New Zealand Herald on Sunday or Monday morning. I'm not quite sure. A lot of people tweeted us with the image. because we're in that realm now where we're talking about being potential World Cup winners, and one of our rivals, which is of course is the All Blacks, because we're going to go toe to toe with the All Blacks apparently, has said that we don't even need to go toe to toe with them because it's theirs. They may as well just hand them the trophy now. So that author Chris Rattue is going to give us his idea for why that is so.
I mean, I'm totally in favour of this. We give them the trophy right now, right now, and then in November we win it off them in Dublin.
Yeah.
A World Cup final in Dublin.
And then they win it back off us.
Chris Rattue, just give us the World Cup now. It's Bowden Barrett, obviously, after his annihilation of the Wallabies at the weekend. Let's just wait and see. And then Bruce Buffer of the UFC is Michael Buffer's brother. Half-brother. They were estranged for decades.
Yeah, he didn't know he was Michael Buffer's brother. We didn't meet him until he was like 28, 29 years old. So he tells that story a little bit later on in his piece.
Michael Buffer is Let's Get Ready to Rumble.
Yes, and he had like Let's Get Ready to Rumble before Bruce even knew he was his brother. So he was watching him on TV, like announcing Mike Tyson fights, and people were like, "You sound like that guy," or there was like little comments made here and there, and his father, kind of in a very blasé way, one day was like, "Oh yeah, you guys are half brothers."
Yeah.
He's like, "What? You're telling me this now?"
Was the dad a bit like, or
not really? Like he didn't. He hasn't really gone into too much detail on that. He did say, however, he becomes immediately Michael Buffer's manager. He's like, "I'm your brother, but you know what brothers are? They're managers."
That worked out well for everybody. Right, let's bring in the newspapers.
OTBAM.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie. Championing the trade with a dedicated call centre.
The Examiner Sports section this morning is back in control. Final pain won't stir Colin McCarran's demons. Pure Football carries Young Guns ready for an innocent final. Don't know what is that
innocent about.
Yeah. Fear Factor, why Rob Kearney didn't want the ball last season and then scrounging for work. Irish road racing champ Conor Dunn's dismay as Aqua Blue collapse. That's the cycling team. Aqua Blue is no longer going to be seeking a UCI licence next year. It was a kind of story that went a bit under the radar this week. Rob Kearney was doing press the other day at the launch of the new relationship that Leinster have with that consultancy firm, and was basically saying that there were times in recent seasons when he would get the ball and he would be terrified that his hamstrings were going to pop. There were 5 hamstring strains in one season a couple of years back, but last season actually things improved vastly and he kind of started to completely enjoy himself again. So, you know, fully fit Rob Kearney and fully confident in his body would be something absolutely spectacular. Kerry's Young Guns ready for an innocent final. I guess because
I suppose it's like under 17.
They're proper kids. You forget that.
Yeah, you do notice it's very noticeable that it is the year younger as well when you've been watching it this year. Like the strength and conditioning clearly hasn't really come into the game.
It's way more like a school's game.
Yeah, and like a lot more scope for crazy stuff to happen. Although, like, you look at the 2011 All-Ireland minor final, and crazy stuff has always happened in minor football finals. But that semi-final against Monaghan was an insane game. Kerry were very lucky to hold on. And, like, correct me if I'm wrong here, I'm trying to think of any, in men's sport it is, any hurling or football team at minor, senior, under 21
that have
done 5 in a row. I don't think it's obviously never happened at senior in hurling or football. It's never happened in minor football before. Kerry were the first team to do 4 in a row. So,
are you getting t-shirts printed?
Well, I may or may not be wearing one right now underneath the shirt.
They'll be for sale around training this week just to make sure the Kerry lads know that actually you may as well just show up.
I'm sure whoever printed those t-shirts in '82 still has them lying around somewhere.
Is the Kerry Man newspaper saying give us the trophy now?
It's not actually. The general belief is that this Galway team is going to be the toughest test in the 5 years.
Yeah, we've never seen a team like it.
Those Galway kids are really scaring the people down in Kerry right now, that's for sure.
Yeah, okay.
Beware of the dog is the front of the Kerry Man this week, I'd say, or something like that.
So obviously, Owen is not going to Electric Picnic this week. He is definitely going to Croke Park to witness that little bit of history.
Well, I wouldn't have got a ticket. I'm not going, but I wouldn't have got a ticket.
Kerry are going to win 5 in a row. Did you even look for a ticket?
I did, actually, yeah. I was trying to get a ticket for somebody else, and
I'd say you tried hard, yeah.
I did try, and it didn't succeed.
And is this going down well amongst your Kerry supporting brethren?
No, they wouldn't be. They wouldn't be overly happy now with me not going to.
What was the direct quote?
I was told that I'm going away to some music shite instead of supporting the Kerry 5 in a row. When in actual fact, I would have probably just stood in the lobby of the Croke Park Hotel and watched this. And like, come on. Like, if I'm not going to be there, I may as well go and do something with my weekend, you know?
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, as in, because you weren't going to get a ticket. Right, so on to the Irish Independent this morning. O'Sullivan primed to bolster Dub's quest. This is A miracle recovery, apparently, from Cian O'Sullivan. A hamstring problem saw the Kilmacud Crokes defender limp out of the first half of the All-Ireland semi-final win over Galway, but his extraordinary powers of recovery have come to the rescue. He's reported to be going extremely well in training. It did look like he felt a twinge and came off straight away. There was no kind of, I'm going to run this off. He didn't need to be a hero at that point. The game was still in the melting pot, as if it was ever in the melting pot, but you could see that Galway were kind of punching themselves out. Kearney, what we did last year won't be enough to win again. That's obviously that Rob Kearney story. And Spurs still in Bazunu hunt, with keeper set to move for record Irish fee. So this is good, that there's actually a bidding war evolving between Manchester City and Tottenham Hotspur. So apparently Roy Donovan was signed for $500,000 by Sunderland in 2007 from Cork City. So the 400 grand switch could yet still be more than that, and could be yet a record for a player from the League of Ireland, which would be good.
Yeah.
We could do some record breaking.
That question, I wonder, are they going to get themselves a clause where you get a 10% selling on fee? That is obviously the key clause you need as a League of Ireland club, isn't it? Because who knows how high Gavin Bazunu's star is going to rise over the next couple of years, but he goes for 20 million in 10 years time, 5 years time somewhere else. It's that's a handy little 200 grand right there.
Yeah, and we'll just take a little percentage as you go, maybe 25% as opposed to...
Well, actually it would be 2 million or 20 million actually.
Greatness of Gavin's dubs butchers by the numbers. It's Donegal Boyle's talking point. 11 men go in search of their 6th medal, while 3 have started every final since 2011. The 3 who started every final since 2011, Cian O'Sullivan, James McCarthy and Stephen Cluxton.
There's 11 going for it, because we were totting this up outside, and we came up with a figure of 10. And Owen O'Gara, there's a bit of a dispute because he doesn't actually play in the final in one of the years, 2013 or 2015.
There was no dispute. It's like he gets an All-Ireland medal. You're like, no, I'm not.
He's not in the matchday squad for the final.
Not
he was out with the cruise ship for the whole year.
Yeah, it's a bit harsh. He would have been in the matchday squad.
He would have been, yeah. I suppose, let me just think. Dennis Bastick would have been in the squad this year if he didn't retire. Or, No,
he retired. I mean, that's different. Injury enforced, you get a medal at the end of the year. Dennis Bastick won't get a medal this year for retiring. Owen O'Gara got one the year that he didn't show up with it.
There was sport is cruel. Sport is cruel sometimes.
Levy making progress after sternum injury. This is Dan Levy, who of course started last season as third choice number 7 for Leinster, and by the end of it was being spoken about as the best number 7 in the Northern Hemisphere. So he's coming back from a sternum injury. It looks like himself, Van der Fleer and Sean O'Brien will all be available for selection at the same time. Can you stick them all in the same team somehow? Turn one of them into a 6.
One into an 8.
Leave Levy at 7 and have Sean O'Brien at 8. Dembele set to go as Lyon state interest. This is Moussa Dembele. Celtic season getting worse and worse and worse and worse. It's like you've got some really good stuff going on, and then all of a sudden, don't qualify for the Champions League. Our best players going away. Didn't get any good players in this year. Rangers suddenly not crap after a long time.
Well, they're less crap for sure.
Yeah,
they might still be crap. Maybe everybody in Scotland is still crap. We just don't know.
They appear to be pretty crap at the weekend. Didn't
they? If Celtic are that bad, as in not getting through, a relatively straightforward tie in the Champions League, and they're better than Rangers, then I would contend that Rangers are still crap.
The Champions League group draw is today. Declan Rice and Manuel Pellegrini gave a press conference yesterday towing the official West Ham party line that we want him to be English because we get loads of money for it. I bet you he's actually on some kind of bonus to convince him to play for England as well. I think that they've seen a little gap, whatever that. So Brian Kerr was talking about stuff last night. There's a clip doing the rounds about how there might have been something more to it, that maybe some incident happened with the Irish setup that has kind of made Declan Rice think about something in a different way.
That'd be unfortunate, wouldn't it? Because the way it's been spoken about is it's like, well, we can't control this.
It's all the agent's fault.
Yeah, it would be horrible to think that maybe that there was an incident that maybe could have been avoided that has actually pushed Declan Rice away, but I guess we just don't know.
So Declan Darcy was obviously doing some media recently in the build-up to the All-Ireland football final. Gavin Cummiskey has a piece with him. Every year is completely different tactically as well. Game sense, it evolves big time. Every year there's a huge shift and you just have to adjust. Other teams set up differently. New teams arrive. And then Eamon Donoghue has a great piece here. Tyrone must force Dublin to do what they don't, take risks. Dublin's shots outside the scoring zone 2018. There are no shots outside the 45.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it?
In 2018, which is...
from play, that is, obviously, but not one. I was very surprised to see that statistic. It's
a great stat.
And there's also a little bit of breathing space in between the 45-metre line and their furthest out shot. So, you're talking 40 42 metres maybe as their furthest outshot, and also
it's in a perfect semicircle as well. It's almost like, there's no Hail Marys from the touchline. Like, they have that 43-metre radius, and it's like almost as if they train within a certain thing and things are programmed.
It's like that point that we've been making before, is that how well would Diarmuid Connolly actually function in this system? Now, the thing is this system, has this gone to a more robotic level this year because Diarmuid Connolly isn't there? Or if Diarmuid Connolly was there, would he just not be as beautifully creative as he always has been because of the system?
I think there would be like 5 or 6 shots from outside the 45, and it'd be a 50% strike rate, and they'd all be Diarmuid Connolly. And like, it'd be done in the first 2 or 3 minutes of a game, where it's like, that's the game plan, lads. But we're the ones who are actually doing that in the pitch now. I don't know if everybody knows this, but Tommy and Tommy Rooney and Eamon Donoghue are flatmates, and Tommy has helpfully found a video from the 2014 game where Connolly scores from 48 yards, just like bangs it over. But I can just imagine the geekery that happens in the conversations about GAA stats. And the state of the club game. I'd say like 4 o'clock in the morning after a night out, there's like a good hour and a half of the two lads just agreeing with each other about the state of the club game and what can be done to fix it.
Yeah, I'd say one person's like, Paul Flynn's hamstring is stronger than Diarmuid Connolly's. No, Diarmuid Connolly's hamstrings are stronger. I'd say that's the arguments that occur in that house.
Right, what have you got for us?
Back page of the Irish Daily Mail has got a good story this morning. Andy staying put. Boost for Ireland as Farrell turns down approach from the RFU. And you've also got that Anthony Martial story, which we'll come back to in a moment. But Andy Farrell, a request was put in from the RFU to get this guy back on the British shore, and he rejected it. So he was obviously sacked by England 2.5 years ago. And just saying before we came on air, the 2015 World Cup failure from England is probably the best thing that ever happened to Irish rugby, not because we hate England, but because it made Stuart Lancaster available, it made Andy Farrell available, and the way the RFU handled this meant that Stuart Lancaster and Andy Farrell hate the RFU, and by extension, love what they're currently doing now. And unless they get another job with, say, maybe going out to the Southern Hemisphere, like I can see them staying put in Irish rugby and helping us out for the foreseeable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's also great that the current England head coach seems to be so widely disliked by his own staff that they're leaving in droves.
Yeah.
They haven't replaced the defence coach. They haven't replaced the attack coach. They've just lost their head of strength and conditioning. This is a story in the papers today that the RFU are kind of looking at this a year out going, we can't get anybody to work with you here. Why does nobody want to work with you, Eddie? It's almost like you have a reputation for not being very much fun to work with.
Yeah, and the thing is, I don't think there's a situation now where you look at it and think, well, it's too late, we're too close to a World Cup. Because you look at the bounce that they got off Eddie Jones within 1 year.
Yeah.
So they could sack Eddie Jones in the morning and still put together a really good chance at putting themselves into contention for the World Cup next year.
I'd say it's 50-50. And it will be 50-50 up until the end of the Six Nations, whether or not he is the head coach at the start of the World Cup.
Who's in more jeopardy, Jose Mourinho or Eddie Jones?
Mourinho, because of the pace at which this all happens.
Yeah, he's going to get sacked first, no question.
Well, also, I mean, look what they're doing. They're signing Anthony Martial to a new 5-year contract. Martial's telling everybody, well, I think I'm going to outlast Mourinho here. That type of stuff. How do the newspapers know what Anthony Martial is thinking unless somebody actually tells them he's going to sign this because he thinks that he's going to be there longer than Jose?
Yeah.
So that the leaking that's happening, it seems quite a bit of leaking going on against Eddie Jones as well. So I would not be surprised if look, Eddie Jones is definitely going to survive to the end of the November internationals, right? But if they go badly, then they have to make that decision, you would suspect, before the Six Nations. But then the Six Nations could be a complete disaster for them if things continue on the path they're on at the moment.
Let's hope so. Back page of the Herald this morning. Is Mickey a class apart? This is Declan Darcy doing the rounds at the moment, not a fellow we often hear from in his current setup. Darcy eager to pit wits against godfather of managers, and you've got that Rogers story as well, admitting to the Dembele interest. Now this is the Anthony Martial story on the back of the Mirror. Old Trafford board offer French striker new 5-year deal despite Jose trying to sell him on, and as George said there, you can read between the lines there. Anthony Martial is fairly confident that he's going to outlast Jose Mourinho at Manchester United. Seems like the hierarchy want to keep him, as they should, because he's a fantastic young player. Jose Mourinho doesn't want to keep him. So it seems that if there's an Anthony Martial versus Jose Mourinho power struggle right now, Anthony Martial is favoured by the Manchester United board to come out on top. And it is that story as well on the back page of the Irish Daily Star. This one up here, though, in the top left, Kieran Cunningham writing that James Horan has been installed as favourite to succeed Stephen Rochford, but he has no intention of getting involved in the speculation. Now, he also seems to have little intention of actually getting involved with the job himself. So inter-county management is incredibly demanding, he says. I did a 4-year stint with Mayo before, and you have to be very careful that it doesn't take over your whole life. It's not an easy gig, and you have to be totally committed to have any chance of making it work. Since stepping down, I've done various other things, and I'm managing Westport at the moment. I'm just trying to find a killer line, which is something he really enjoys. To be honest, our return to the inter-county game hasn't been on my short-term radar. We're in the quarterfinals of the Mayo Championship. My name has been mentioned, but there's been no approach. With my involvement with Westport, it wouldn't be right or fair to draw into any speculation that's going around. So short term is the key word there. Does he mean short term as in like
January?
That's it, or does he mean short term as in this year, next year? Let me take over after the next manager's kind of done his bit next year.
Is there an All-Ireland window open, or is there an All-Ireland window closing for Mayo?
Well, it's still open, but it is closing. Every single year we say they'll never be back, and a lot of people who say that were proved right this year. And I think there was that theory at the start of 2017 that it was like, Mayo are done, they're too old, they're ageing, and then they proved us all wrong in 2017. So we came into this year and we forgot the empirical evidence in front of us, which was that there were some key players and key positions that are ageing, but it's Mayo. They're going to get through the back door even if they lose to Galway, and they're going to challenge Dublin. And then suddenly they didn't. And they lost to Kildare, and they were out of the championship. And maybe what everybody was saying at the start of 2017 actually rang true, that this is a rapidly declining team. Still a great team, but a rapidly declining one. And I can't see any evidence to suggest that that's not the case, that it's still not declining.
They have a bunch of really good young players who will be a year older. They still have some wise old heads who, like, they were absolutely cursed with injuries this year.
Yeah, it's fair.
Use the word cursed actually.
Well, like, they lost their midfield.
Yeah, and like you can't afford to lose. When you're Mayo, you need like 90% of your players to be available 90% of the time. With Dublin, you can afford some injuries here and there, but it's funny that Dublin actually don't get that many soft tissue injuries. Like, their strength and conditioning seems to be really good. The point, I guess, that I'm making is that it feels like Mayo have enough resources to be able to be competitive, and then it's whether or not they have the game smarts and the tactics and the big time mentality, which they clearly do from their best players, to put it up to Dublin. So, like, if this was a Mayo Dublin All-Ireland final this weekend, the country would be going completely mental.
It would be. I think Darren was just saying out in the office that we've taken it all for granted. I think we've taken Mayo for granted. The joy that Mayo have actually brought to it. I didn't know that Mayo were bringing me joy over the last couple of years, but I realise now that they were.
Could say they were one of the best stories of the Irish sporting decade.
Let's not go that far.
If you do, your Twitter handle, your Twitter account will blow up.
Back page of the Sun is push up or get crushed. Kickouts key for Alan. So Alan Brogan here has advised Tyrone to push up on Stephen Cluxton's kickouts in the All-Ireland final on Sunday. This is something...
Can I just ask you, if you're Tyrone, are you taking any advice from Alan Brogan on how to beat Dublin? Are you? Are you like looking at that going, geez, he's right. We definitely have to do what this former footballer of the year, Dublin legend, brother of Bernard, is telling us how to be. I don't think he's telling the full truth when he's giving advice on how to beat the Dubs.
To be fair,
I just don't think it's happening.
In the year 2018, saying that you need to push up on Cluxton's kickouts is like saying you need to mark your man tightly. It kind of goes without saying. Well, to a certain extent, you've got to push up on some of the kickouts. Come
on, exactly. It's not right. It absolutely isn't right, because the very first kick-out in last year's All-Ireland semi-final, Tyrone pushed up, Cluxton chipped it over their heads, and the Dubs had the game won. It was over.
Yeah.
It's done. At that stage, you're like,
it was a Rory Beggan kick-out, wasn't it? Then one of those floaters that just go right over. I don't know. It completely changes. It fluctuates massively whether or not you push up or not, and it depends on the situation of the game. We will have Fitzmaurice and Keegan on in a few minutes to kind of give us a bit more detail on that. Both teams have had a bit of success against Cluxton, against Dublin. When I say a bit of success, I mean like brought them to the pin of their collar in big championship games. But
pretty successful.
Yeah, it's relatively...
We're talking about this being the greatest team of all time. That's pretty successful. Like, you're right there as the greatest team of all time on the biggest occasion. Yeah. I mean, like, what? That whole point of sport is to be competitive. It's not to win, it's to be competitive.
Yeah. Well, I guess being competitive is part of it. Winning is also important.
Winning is nice, but you can't guarantee it.
No, that's true. Back page of The Guardian this morning is Southgate rings changes. Young makes way for Shaw's England recall. And the Daily Telegraph then is going with cricket. Gloves are off. Bairstow unhappy after being told by Root that Butler will keep wicket against India. And you've got that Shaw call up as well. That he's one of the few figures at Manchester United whose stock is rising at the moment, Luke Shaw, or it's back on the rise. He's slowly rebuilding his form, slowly rebuilding his reputation, and back in the England squad.
Giving up all that ice cream, I think, is kind of the key to the success that Luke Shaw is having. Right, big news here. We've got a brand new NFL show coming your way every Wednesday during the NFL season. We put our first show up yesterday. Next one will go live next Wednesday afternoon. Cian Fahey is going to join us every week to help preview the big games and talk about the big stories. We'll have some very special guests dropping in over the course of the season as well. Also, Eamon is going to join us next week. We had Jason Bell on our very first show yesterday. It's all in association with Subway Ireland, and we are going to be giving away tickets to the games in Wembley over the course of the next month or so. So make sure you stay tuned to the radio show on News Talk, or of course, if you're just listening to us here on OTBAM, as you can do every day on offtheball.com, then we'll be giving you details of how you can win, and make sure you stay tuned to all our social channels as well. The full show is up on YouTube right now for you to have a look at from yesterday. It's also available for download as a podcast in our Highlights podcast stream. Here's a clip of Jason Bell.
Is that the scariest moment in a football match and on a football field, when there is a kick-off return happening and everybody is moving as fast as they can and trying to be as big a weapon as they can?
It is for sure, undeniably, before the rule change, the most violent play in football. And I hate to say it, I used to love it. I used to love it. You would run down full speed, and at that time, they could have a 4-man wedge, and they would put the 4 biggest linemen in that wedge, and it was my job at my side to take out 2 of them. And I had to literally split them and make them fall down and blow the wedge up. And that was my job. You used to sit on film, and the coach would say, did you do your job? Did you blow up the wedge? And the whole team is watching to make sure you did it. And you would, like you said, you'd run down and launch yourself in there, and hopefully you got up to play another play. And I used to enjoy it. Very dangerous, but it was exciting.
That last split second before you launch into the wedge, what's that like?
I mean, you just gotta, something has to be different about you, because it is suicidal. It is legitimately crazy. And you have to have this element about your personality that you kind of appreciate pain, because it's painful. And you just go in there and it's just man on man or 2-on-1, and it's who's tougher. And, you know in film on Monday, everybody was watching it. So you wanted to prove to your teammates that you were as tough as you said you were. And so you went out there and you just blanked. You just blacked out and try to blow everything up. That's what I used to do.
Yeah, Jason Bell, one of the stars of the BBC's coverage. We'll speak with OC Eamon next week as well. You looking forward to the return? Are you? What's your level of NFL?
Level of NFL, what?
Fandom.
Yeah, I think I can empirically look at it and say this is the best sport in the world when I watch American football. It just has everything. It has amazing coverage, it has amazing pundits, it has amazing analysis. It's a brilliant sport where every single play matters, and it is endlessly intriguing. So, despite the fact that it's not my favourite sport, I can kind of look at it in the cold light of day and say, yep, no, I accept that is the best sport that exists in the world. And it's fantastic. Like I've always said, that BBC show with Jason and Ozzy is one of the most underrated shows that we've got in sport on this side of the Atlantic anyway.
Yeah.
Because I think British coverage of American sports gets unfairly maligned sometimes. It's like, oh, what do they know about it? Well, I guess first of all, they've got 2 Yanks on the show who've played in the NFL. They know a lot about it.
Ozzy's not a Yank.
Well, he's got an American accent. I know he's like...
He was born in England, moved to Nigeria, went to Auburn as a 16-year-old. So we'll get into that with him next week. It's an unbelievable backstory. So as a 7-year-old, he's taken from England, from London, to go and live in Nigeria. And then as a 15-year-old, he goes to America for the first time to Auburn, which is obviously home of the famous Auburn college team, and picks up football for the first time, picks up the game for the very first time, and doesn't become really good at it until college, where there's a conversation he has with a coach in college who says, you're playing in the middle of the defensive line there. I'm going to put you on the edge, and your job is to go and try and crush the quarterback. And from that point forward, he becomes rich.
Yeah, I think the main reason why I love that BBC show is because of Ozzy's hatred for Tom Brady and quarterbacks in general. It's just, he's clearly such a nice man, but his hatred for quarterbacks in general just really comes across. And I can respect any person who's got such a passionate hatred for one position on the pitch. I'm looking forward to it. Like, also as well, the thing I forgot to mention there was when it comes to fantasy football, like the NFL, there is no question that is the best fantasy game out there by a country mile.
Yeah.
Like the level of detail in that, the drafts. We had a draft the other night for one of our leagues, and it's just beautiful. It's like you get excited again, and just there is this accumulation of knowledge coming now over the last couple of years that might kind of allow me to become a pseudo fan of NFL.
Well, you were at one of the England games, the games in London. Was it
Yeah,
at
it was
Wembley or where was the one you were at?
It was in Wembley, yeah, but it was supposed to be a shit game. It was supposed to be the crap Baltimore Ravens, who are crap, against equally crap Jacksonville Jaguars, who turned out to be brilliant. And afterwards, I'm like, you know what? I got to see Blake Bortles in the flesh. Got to see Leonard Fournette in the flesh.
Yeah. Jalen Ramsey.
Jalen Ramsey, of course. Of course, Blake Bortles is the greatest quarterback to ever play the game. It was great to see him live and up close and personal. He's still there, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. Yeah. I don't know if the Ravens are going to be crap this year. Apparently, they've had a really good off-season and could actually be quite good.
Yeah, there was... here's my level of NFL insight. When I was drafting the other day, there was a really good player who now plays for the Baltimore Ravens. I can't remember his name, and he obviously traded in the off-season. So there you go. That's the level of analysis I'm bringing to the sport.
Okay, good stuff. Well, if anybody out there wants us to do a bit more NFL with a bit more detail, feel free to ask for it, because I would happily do it morning, noon and night. So if there's a weight of opinion out there that we should be doing a bit more of it, then let the producers know. You can tweet us at Off The Ball or at Off The Ball AM. And so we're going to turn our attention to the weekend's Gaelic football action. Eamon Fitzmaurice and Lee Keegan are on the line to help us to preview this. Lads, you're both very welcome. Eamon, if I can start with you, is there a little pang of regret this week? Is it automatic that you should really be hopefully preparing a team to take on Dublin? Are you kind of going through the motions about what this week might have been like, or have you managed to divorce yourself from that?
Yeah, no, Neil and Hedger, lots of, I suppose, wistful thinking this week are all right, but I'll be happy when the week is over, to be honest. I think anyone that's not involved in the All-Ireland final is like that when you've ambitions to be involved. So immersing myself in work this week and busy at that, so that's no harm.
Schools are back and you've got a new gig as a principal, so obviously it's not a bad thing to throw yourself into.
No, exactly. Yeah, I've been enjoying it now. The first couple of weeks, I suppose, I've been more or less back since the Leaving Cert results, and this week then we were full steam ahead. So it's been a busy few days, and as I said, that's been no harm to keep me occupied. But obviously, there's still thoughts about the weekend, of course.
Lee, what about you? Did you obviously have to make peace after what happened in Newbridge? Does this week kind of make you remember what last year was like, and just feed the desire a little bit to get back into training and start thinking about maybe stop in Dublin next year?
Yeah, very much like Eamon, I suppose. This week is always a tough one when you're not involved, because this is the best week of your life to be prepping for such a big game. It's one of my first years I've been involved this late in the season, so I'm trying to adapt as best possible. As Eamon said, I'm trying to bury my head in as much work to kind of keep away from the press and reading about their skills and the tactics and all these bits and pieces. So yeah, definitely looking back with a bit of regret. But listen, this is the beauty of sport and the toughest of sport, that you have to knuckle down and you have to prep again for next year and try and get yourself in a position to come back to this big week that we've seen over the last couple of years.
How far out from games, Lee, did you know exactly what your role was going to be? Like, was it immediately after the semi-final, the first meeting after that there'd be a chat going, your specific role in the All-Ireland final is going to be this or this? Or did that evolve and the thinking evolve as management and yourself would have been having conversations? How did that work?
I think it evolves maybe as the weeks go on. I suppose, depending on what week you were usually out, if we're 4 weeks out from the final or 3 weeks, it'd be very dependent. So usually with 10 or 12 days go, the management give you a little inkling that you could be marking A, B or C, so you'd be kind of prepping your training around that kind of guy you're marking and pick up a similar type figure in training and then A versus B games. So I think it's very much around the time you own your game and trying to adapt to how training is going to be. And obviously we'd known over the time it was probably going to be Dublin over the last couple of years, so it was pretty much down to probably marking the likes of Dermot Connolly or maybe Kieran Kilkenny. So And I don't think too much change over the years, having to mark two of the best players in the country. That's, that you're entrusted in detailing these guys in the pitch. So your duty and your task is going to be difficult one way or another.
They're very different players though, so is there a different preparation for them, and not knowing whether or not Connolly was going to start last year, were you surprised Connolly didn't start last year, or did you kind of have a fair guess that he'd be coming on as a sub?
I think we planned without Connolly last year, to be really honest. We very much detailed maybe Kilkenny as the main ball winner there last year in terms of, I suppose he was known as the quarterback role. So, again, as you mentioned, two totally different players, but two hugely influential guys for Jim Gavin and how to play the game for Dublin. And particularly this year, in Kieran Kenny looked like more of a scoring threat. He scored something like 221 in Championship this year, so that's been a big feature. And something I'd love to have been marking this weekend, because again, last year he played maybe a bit of a safer role and more of a creator scorer. He's got that bit of a scoring edge back this year, so it definitely would have been a tough challenge for the weekend, and will be a tough challenge for Tyrone and how they handle that.
Eamon, we've all been obsessed with how you stop the Dubs, basically, since Jim Gavin's team were such a swashbuckling team the first time round, and then obviously post Donegal that style changed. But there's been constant conversations asking pundits, what do you do when you're coming up against Dublin? So I guess it's one of those things that you've thought about a lot over the years. Ultimately, is there a single package in your head, a range of different tactics that you think is the basis of the game plan that gives you the architecture around which to build a winning performance against the Dubs?
Yeah, I think, I think they're an outstanding team, and they're the full package in terms of the players they have, the manager they have, the backroom staff they have, the resources they have, and the way they use those resources. They're the full package. So to beat them, you have to get everything nearly right on the day. Other teams, you might, get a few things wrong, but still get over the line. But to beat Dublin, you're going to have to earn it, because they're not going to give it to you. But I think a basic thing, and it might sound very simplistic, but you have to have the ball against them. And, when you look at them and how you're going to get the ball, it's from your own kick out, from their kick out. From their kick out, obviously, Stephen Cluxton is so good, and they're so good out the field and making runs and movement for him, that often in many games they end up with, 90% of their own kick out, and they're good in the opposition kick out then, and if they even get, 50-50 in that, that's a lot of possession for them then, and they're clinical, and they've got on, as you said, they've evolved from that swashbuckling team to a more of a possession-based team, and they wait for the right option and the right opportunity, and they're very good at that. So I think you need to get after Stephen Cluxton if you can. Tyrone did quite well in the closing stages of the game in Omagh in that regard, but it's a very different ball game in Croke Park compared to Omagh, and they'll have to get their own kick out right. Now, one thing that Niall Morgan does have in his lockers, he does have kind of a long booming kick out over the top, that if Dublin do really press up as they can do, that Tyrone may get some joy from that if they can win long kickouts over the top and go after Dublin from there. But as I said, it sounds very simplistic, but I think you need to get your hands in the ball, and when you get the ball, then you need to make Dublin pay. And obviously, the other thing there, Lee mentioned this, is that you've got to get after their key players. Kieran Kilkenny, Brian Fenton in particular, they're hugely influential for them. They've got a load of great players, but if you can stop a couple of their key guys, certainly it can make life a bit easier for yourself.
Eamon, we all saw before half-time in the 2016 semi-final the way you went after Cluxton's kickouts with a good degree of success, and I think it's fair to say half-time probably came a bit too soon for Kerry on that occasion. What was actually said to the players that day? What was the thought process that went into that game plan against Cluxton's kickouts?
Yeah, we practiced that kick-out a lot in the lead into that game, where we put, we had we two banks of four up front, and we had another bank of four in the middle of the field then, so that, in fairness to Stephen Cluxton, you can go to man with the Dublin backs. We had success earlier in our years, I suppose, just by going with 6 zone forwards, but he became so accurate, and the Dublin backs became so good at just even getting 2 yards of space, and he was able to pick them out, and we had to go a bit more extreme that day. And it worked, and like you said, it probably half-time probably came at the wrong time for us that day, because to be fair to Dublin, they're very good at using half time to gather themselves, and if a team are doing something to them, that they're good at adjusting at half time. But it was something we had practiced in training. It was something we used a nice bit again this summer against some of the teams we played. But obviously it's a risk reward, because when you're pushing so many bodies forward, if you lose the kick out, you're pretty wide open at the back. But it was something we enjoyed working on, and it was something that was satisfying then when it worked in the big day.
Yeah, and I think the idea as well is that it's not pushing up all the time. It's kind of, you do it sometimes, you don't do it other times. Lee, would you relate to what Eamon is saying there, in what he's saying in terms of having 2 banks of 4? I'm not sure would you consider zonal marking, but certainly positionally you're a lot more advanced and a lot more aggressive than he would be. Is that something you specifically worked on, and how often would you have implemented it?
Yeah, I think the 2016 final particularly, we'd actually watched that game from Kerry and Dublin semi, and we learned hugely from what Eamon had done. And it's something we experienced quite a lot in the finals, that Dublin had that 2 banks of 4 pushing up, and we did get a bit of joy at times. Again, I don't think you can sustain it for a full 70 minutes against the Dublin team that have a savage bench that are coming on to finish off the job. So I think it's very much around picking your times and moments when you do it. We were very much looking at their set plays and how we can negate that and how we can set up more appropriately. So we had a free taker taken on the right hand side. You don't necessarily push your free taker onto his original man. We leave him in that pocket of space, and then you fill each side as best possible. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it. But again, as Eamon said, when you get to Croke Park, I think the Dublin defenders over the last couple of years have just worked in them little 2 or 3 yards, and in Croke Park, that's huge for not only the defender running space, but for a forward trying to defend that. It's not the prettiest place in the world. And then again, when you look at their key players like Fenton, he dominates the middle third, and they're not just good at making the runs in space, they're very good aerial as well. You look at McCarthy as well, Fenton, you look at Kenny, these guys are well able to put the ball in the sky as well. So you have so many different options for Dublin, and so many different parts of the game you're trying to negate and stop. So I don't think it's just about stopping maybe one side, it's trying to stop their array of kickouts, and again, they become very systematically brilliant at it, because that's just what the top teams do, and Dublin unfortunately are the best team at the moment for doing it.
Eamon, what about when you do have the ball? What's the best way of actually going about attacking the Dubs?
Yeah, well, I think, just as Lee said there, I think all teams are looking at each other in the way that they've dealt with the Dubs, and I think Mayo have been very effective at that, and it was something that we learned and we used in the 2017 games. We drew with them in the league in Tralee, we beat them in the league final, and it was more playing a more measured approach than we would normally play, in terms of, I think if you're trying to be, a lot of people think that they have vulnerabilities in the full back line, and that if you're excuse me, if you're very direct against them, that they can be vulnerable to that. But we've tried that down the years, and their defenders are actually outstanding, and they're very good. They're very good at defending from the front, and they're quite comfortable with aerial ball as well. So I think you need to mix it. But I think what they are vulnerable to is teams running at them, as all teams are, because it's hard to, it's something that's hard to defend. Mayo have had good success at it. Tyrone in league games as well. Last league game they played in Croke Park, I think it was maybe last year in 2017. They were very good. I'm not sure, was it a draw maybe, or Dublin might have won by a point. Tyrone actually ran the ball very effectively in that game. So I think when you have the ball, you have to go in numbers, you have to run hard, you have to get the support runners, and you have to get the Dublin forwards going the other way. They will work, they are honest players, but it's not really what they want to be doing. If you can get the Howards, the Kilkennys, the Scullys, even the Manions, the Con Costello, James McCarthy, get all of them fellas going the other way, and you're starting to play the game a small bit on your terms. But I think hard running at them, you can get joy from it. And as I said, I think Mayo got joy from that in the past, and we got joy from it certainly in that league final as well.
Eamon Donoghue's writing the Irish Times this morning saying that half of Dublin's goals they've conceded this year, granted it's only 2 of 4, but they've come from high balls into the square, and granted Stephen Cluxton did make an error on both occasions, but we'll remember the Damien Comer one in particular. Did you feel that Kieran Donaghy was a big weapon for you against Dublin in particular, Eamon, relatively to some of the other forward options you might have had against them?
Yeah, I think he was. I think he's very effective, and I think that it's the mix, I think, is what you have to get, is that if every ball is going in long to Kieran, The halfbacks are going to cheat back. Sullivan's going to cheat back and so on in front of him, and they're good at, kind of taking a man's ground and breaking the ball away and picking up breaks. You've got to get the half forwards on the ball as well, get them to maybe get a score or two so that it sucks out the half back line, and if you can get Kieran then or a target man in one-on-one situations, that's what you want. They're the kind of situations you want to get. But I think that ball in for the Comer goal in the semi-final, I'm not sure who kicked it in, but it was a very kind of a flat trajectory. It was a hard one to defend, and it was one of those perfect balls that there was pace on it. It was a kind of a flat trajectory. Cluxton was tempted by it, and in fairness to Damien Comer, then when he got a contact on it, it was like a missile. It was like a good cross in soccer that once you get your head on it, then it kind of adds this. So I think there's a lot in it, but if you have a target man, and Tyrone have been using Donnelly in that regard, it's a good thing to have because it can keep their backs honest, and it can kind of tempt their half back line to be a bit closer to the full back line and stop them going forward as much, which is a good thing. But it's all about the mix, because if you go one way against Dublin, they'll snuff it out, and they're very good both management wise and player wise at adapting to what's being presented in front of them. So if you're just bombing in high ball, they'll deal with that. You might get a bit of joy out of it, but I think you have to mix it up.
I mean, we know you have to go, but just before we let you go, how close a game should this be at the weekend? If Tyrone do everything that they want to do, how close a game will it be?
Oh, look, Ger, it's sport. I give Tyrone a massive shout. I think for Tyrone to win, Dublin need to play a bit below par. Tyrone need to get everything right. It's hard in a big game to get everything right, but it can happen, and that's the beauty of sport. I think the Tyrone team now, they've been, a lot of them have been around the block. A share of them were there when we beat them in the semi-final in 2015. They've been around the block now for a couple of years, and they're probably ready for the next step in terms of having a right cut at an All-Ireland final. But as I said, Dublin are, they're the full package with regard to everything that they have. They kind of have a perfect storm going on at the moment, so they'll need to be below par. Tyrone will need to get everything right, but that can happen, and it's and in sports anything can happen, and that's the beauty of it. So I'm not sure what the chat is like this week. I presume it's going to be an easy enough win for Dublin. I'm not quite sure it'll work out that way. I think anytime you win an All-Ireland, you have to really earn it. So I think that's probably the way the game will pan out on Sunday.
Eamon, great stuff. Thanks a million. We'll let you get back to work. Lee, if you've got a second, I might ask you the same question. What do you actually expect to happen in terms of one of the things that was very noticeable about your Mayo team and Eamon Fitzmaurice's Kerry team was that they were two of the very few teams, and maybe the only two teams, who would ever take the field against Dublin genuinely believing that they were going to win the match. We've seen so many teams come out and kind of put it up to Dublin. There'll be a bit of a scrap, and then suddenly Dublin are 10 points up in the blink of an eye. That didn't tend to happen to your two teams, because you genuinely had the belief, the tactics, the physicality, the conditioning, and everything that you need to go into it. Do Tyrone have that?
I'd agree with him. I think they do this year. As you mentioned, like even a lot of them lads who we played against were actually in the squad in 13. We beat them in the All-Ireland semi-jar. So they definitely have a mix of players now and experience that they can go after Dublin. But again, I would fully agree with him instead. I think, you need to have Dublin a bit below par on Tyrone. Nearly probably have to have the perfect game. Now, I do like the fact that Tyrone are very inept about running the ball. I think they're very good at it. And particularly at times, if they're shooting a bit better against Mon in the semi-final, it could have been a 6-7 point win for them. Instead, it was a lot tighter game than expected. So they've got runners like Tiernan McCann coming from the back. Nice Sutton's doing brilliant stuff from the half forward. I think Mike Donnelly is a huge player for them. So they've got the quality of players to hurt Dublin. Can they sustain it for the 70 minutes? I don't know. That this is the biggest challenge for Tyrone, because we know what Dublin can do. We know their bench is pretty awesome, and they bring on some of their subs and the experience they have. So I do think it's going to be a close game. I do think Tyrone are going to go and believing under Mickey, and Mickey does have a squad believing they're going to win All-Ireland this year, and I think that's no different. But again, can they sustain that for the full 70 minutes? That's my biggest question for Tyrone.
Leader, just one last thing I wanted to ask you, just in the context of this game. Like, we were speaking about matchups before we came on air, and I think the one thing that's been touted all week is that Hampsey's going to mark Ciarán Kilkenny. But then you look at the rest of the Dublin threats, and you look at the rest of Tyrone's marquee players who can do a job on them. And Matty Donnelly came up, as in, do you dedicate him to a man-marking job? You don't really, because you're going to take away from his attacking threat. But then you start to think about your job that you did on Diarmuid Connolly, where you were still able to contribute offensively while also marking Dublin's best player, really. So how do you get that balance right, and how important is that at the specific example of how Tyrone approached this Sunday?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of risk involved in doing so. I think with Tyrone, though, I think they can have that little bit of risk, Roar, because in Cullum Cabinet they have a sweeper there that is the best sweeper in the game, and we've seen that over the championship, that how important he is for Tyrone and how well he reads the game. So for the likes of Tyrone McCann, I think in particular, whose fitness is pretty insane, I think he needs to take risk and just take it on and go for it. And Matty Donnelly, if they're going to put him as a designated man marker, I think you're taking away from Tyrone's running game, particularly because, like in the second half against Monaghan, I thought Matty Donnelly really controlled the game. He's really good in the ball. He was driving them forward, winning frees. So I think Matty Donnelly is critical to what they're doing. He's a huge cog for them. Again, the likes of Peter Hart as well. They need to get these guys in the ball, because the game in Noma, the three of these guys were snuffed out pretty early by Jim Gavin. He recognised how important they were, and that's why I suppose Tyrone didn't really live up to the bill until the last 10 minutes, and when they got these players kind of freed from the shackles of their defenders, that they could actually do a bit of damage. So there's definitely a bit of risk involved, and that's something we highlighted. It's all well good doing the man marking job, but if you're not willing to make a few runs each half and try and influence the game, then you're not going to have a chance against Dublin. And put these guys in the back foot. We all know how good the likes of Kieran Kenny is, Paul Mannion, Sully, all these guys are going forward, but put them on the back foot. Even though they will work hard, if you put them in the back foot, you're going to get some form of joy out them. And I think Tyrone have that fitness and that capacity to do so. But again, are they willing to take them high risks that we did in finals or Kerry did in semis and finals? That's the biggest question for Mickey, and I hope they can, because I think it'll really add to the game. Yeah,
a quick question about taking those risks. You were somebody who went for goal as opposed to clipping an easy point. Was that because the opportunity was there, or did you have it in your head, if I'm going forward, the defence will actually look, your inside forwards will keep their defenders busy, and because you're an extra man, that there's a good chance for you to score a goal? Was that pre-planned that you were going to go for goal rather than clip the easy points?
Definitely not pre-planned to get that far. I know. I suppose when you get those chances, they're very limited against Dublin. You mentioned they've conceded 2 out of 4 chances in the championship, which is pretty good stat for your defence. So you're not going to get a lot of goal chances or opportunities. So for me, when I was in the position, and again, I had forwards that were lucky to get out of my way. Now, I don't know how much of the trust me shooting, but you have to. I think again, I took the risk of saying, if I got a chance like that, I'm going to go for it, because you're not going to get too many in the final. And looking at previous finals and stats, to get a goal in All-Ireland final is hugely important. But I suppose ultimately they got the goal too. So yeah, I think when you get in those positions, Jerry, you have to take a goal chance. I think you can clip the points over all day, but when you have a guilt-edged one-on-one opportunity, whether you score or not, like Jason Doherty won last year, it was saved well by Clucks, and he had the bravery to take it on. The risk you're going to have to take on All-Ireland final day, because if Tyrone are to get 1 or 2 or 3 goal chances, they need to at least score one of them to have any chance of the game on Sunday.
Yeah, probably 2, to be honest. A quick question about the Mayo manager's job. Were you guys surprised ultimately that Stephen did decide to step away, or did you have an inkling over it, the way it had just been rumbling on for quite a while?
No, to be honest, we were all a bit shocked as a group, to be honest. I think we fully believed that Stephen was going to be our manager for the year ahead for 2019. I suppose we were looking to that, or we were going to build towards that. So I suppose we were probably out of the dark a little bit, because we're involved in the club championship currently. And again, we're probably notified that Stephen was trying to get a backroom team together. So there wasn't a lot of pressure on players to be getting involved. It was more about, let Stephen and the county board work in the background to get what they needed for us as players and for us for 2019, and start building towards putting the rights or putting the wrongs right next year. So a bit of a shock to the players, to be honest, and it's something we could have done without. And we were lucky enough to have Stephen for the last 3 years, and nearly brought us to the Holy Grail on 2 of those occasions. So really, he owes nothing in terms of what he brought to us. But yeah, it's disappointing for players to having to, I suppose, face into a winter of maybe uncertainty on who's going to come in now and take over. So I suppose that's the biggest challenge there.
Yeah, he obviously said there was no support from the Mayo County Board, and not enough for him to go ahead. Do you think he deserved maybe a little bit more support, given the job, as you say, getting so close to Dublin over the last couple of years?
Definitely, and Stephen's earned what he's got with Mayo, and you've seen from the way we played over the last, well, particularly the 2 years prior to this year, that we were within a a breeze of beating probably one of the greatest teams out there, and that's not down to luck or any fluke at all. That's down to brilliant management and brilliant planning, and having that, I suppose, having that tactical know-how. That he did believe that we could beat Dublin. Now, the only probably thing that you went against us as players, we never won a medal under Stephen, which was disappointing from management and probably player point of view. But I suppose we had Conor McGregor. It was all about landing the big one. But I think Stephen, deserved any bit of praise he got, or any congrats. Or I think just it was probably handling it poorly from himself. And Stephen, as I said, Stephen couldn't give us much more as a manager, and from a player point of view. And I know he was highly regarded within the group of guys. And of course, Stephen's biggest challenge was trying to fill a backroom team that were with us for 4, 5, 6 years, and if that was happening in any other county, including Dublin or Kerry or Tyrone, that's a huge void to fill, and a lot of pressure on guys. And I think you need to take your time in doing a process and looking at the best possible candidates to come in and pick up what was left behind. So I think Stephen deserves a huge amount of praise, and from personally and from a group point of view, we can't say no more than thank him, because he did so much with us, and he pushed us to the boundaries that we thought we'd never go.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Should the players be involved in the selection, or what level of representation do you think you guys should have? I know that was kind of a key thing for you guys in the past as a group. Obviously, you've come through some difficult times as a group. Do you hope that your voice is listened to, at least when it comes to the criteria that are laid down for the next manager?
Of course, I think it's important to have a leadership and a player-led group to, I suppose, come in and give some feedback and learn from maybe what went on before, or maybe what we could have done better as players, and what management could have given us. So I think it's important to have a player voice, because, again, the players are going to be working with this manager throughout the next year, maybe 2 or 3 years. So, and that was something that worked well when Stephen was brought in, that there was a player voice, and they made it clear that they wanted Stephen in originally. So. And again, that worked brilliantly over the time we had Stephen. So I think it is important, because at the end of the day, it's the players that are going to be playing under him, and the players that are going to be trusting what, I suppose, he's going to bring to the setup, and what selectors and backroom he's going to bring out of him. So definitely, I think it's important, and it shouldn't be just put over players' heads. Like, I think it's important to connect with some of the leaders out there, particularly in our own group. So there's some really good voices that can be heard and have some good ideas, and maybe we can learn a bit from that, and maybe the county board can take on a bit of that advice going forward now for the next 2 or 3 months. Yeah, all right, Lee, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Enjoy the game this weekend. Thank you. Lee Keegan there, and Eamon Fitzmaurice. I'm always constantly amazed that it's like a bunch of people who aren't involved in the game, who we watch on TV analysing the matches, as opposed to the most recently out of the game manager and the players who are currently playing it. I think that having Lee as part of the Sunday game coverage has revolutionised it. Yeah, he's been brilliant. Actually saying, playing against that player, this is what happens. This is what they're doing right there. This is their pre-kick out movement and the patterns that are happening with it, as opposed to, I don't like this game. This game is not entertaining to me. Yeah, it's to be fair, it's not just GAA that kind of suffers from that sort of stuff. It's the curse of the panel. It is the curse of the panel, exactly, and we get it quite a lot in terms of our Premier League consumption as well. That being said, there is something to be said. Like you used to get it in rugby as well. Yeah, like it was just your job to tell the dumb audience whether or not they should be enjoying this thing that they've decided to spend 3 hours watching this weekend. Yeah, sure. Like. Obviously, there is potential there for people who've been out of the game for a while to be quite forward-thinking, like Graham Souness is a great example in soccer. Yeah. Okay, so former Mayo boss John Mullen was on the show last night talking to Adrian. He is the new Offaly manager. Here he is talking about the managerial situation in Mayo. There's a huge amount of conjecture and rumours, and the rumour mill is in absolute sort of full-on mode about why he left and all that sort of stuff. And it seems like as if you're saying he almost didn't have an option but to almost get the hell out of there at that stage before things got even deeper. Yeah, and that would have been my advice to him. I was to step aside. I suppose when there's a vacuum, and unfortunately what happened here in Mayo, the backroom team, Donny Buckley, who had been here for 6 years, I worked with him in Clare back in 1994, fantastic coach, and obviously Tony McEntee had been in here for the couple of years with Stephen, and Peter Burke had stepped up from goalkeeping coach to be a selector with this year. All three departed, and at that juncture Stephen would have started looking for alternatives to those individuals, and I suppose Mayo probably would look for a high-profile coach. There are very few of them in the marketplace, but that appears to have become a part of the equation now when you're managing an inter-county team. You've got, particularly the likes of the Mayo, they've got to have a high-profile coach who has proved himself, and they're few and far between. And
I suppose the longer that went on, and the element of procrastination, people begin to speculate when there's a vacuum, and that probably wasn't healthy. And maybe decisions should have been made much earlier, whether that was the appointment of staff to the job or whatever. But that didn't happen, and in the absence, I say, of decisions, things began to unravel, and that appears to what happened down here.
Do you think, John, that the county board sort of made up their mind that they wanted to move on without Stephen for whatever reason, and he did, as you say?
No, that would. I know for a fact that would not have been the case. I know they were quite keen to have Stephen in charge. As I say, I don't know the exact details. I'm not, and I certainly wouldn't speculate as to what happened. I don't know what happened, but you saw, and we all read Stephen's statement where he felt that he hadn't got the support of the executive. But I know up to last week, he certainly would have had the support of a number of that executive. I don't know what happened in the interim.
Yeah, well, something happened. How are you, Darren?
I'm very well, Jerry. Yourself?
On a scale of like 0 to 10, 10 being absolutely livid, pissed off beyond belief, how annoyed are you about the fact that the whole country is trying to work out ways to beat Dublin?
It's natural.
You're patronising us now. I love it.
No, I'm not patronising. It's hard to sit here and be humble when Dublin have done so much. As a Dublin fan, you can't sit here and say, "Oh, look, it's great." I think there's an expectation now that it will take something pretty different to beat Dublin, because they found a way to not play football when they're winning, which is really, really smart. It's horrible to watch. This whole keep ball thing can be very, very frustrating on the eye. It's not particularly pretty.
Ole!
Yeah.
Ole!
But look,
those fans seem to be enjoying it, in fairness.
It takes incredible discipline as a manager to make 15 individuals subscribe to that worldview. It's not easy at all. I don't know how we beat Dublin.
It's more than 15 though, isn't it?
Well, 15 at any one time, I suppose.
But like the culture of kind of sitting there, and it's like imagine saying to Eric Lowndes, I'm not sure was there a conversation over the last couple of games, but it's like, if he knew beforehand, you're not going to play a single minute in the next 2 games, he'd be like, what the hell?
Was it not? You suggested on this programme, I think, that the reason Dermot Connolly moved to America was because he couldn't kick pass anymore.
What?
Not in those exact terms.
I did not say that. That's completely taking it out of context.
You've asked a few people at questions at Time Zone which centred around the fact of, do you think Dermot Connolly would like to play this hand passing game?
Yeah. Do you think he would?
I don't think so, no.
Well, there you go.
Not a guy who's naturally gifted on both feet. But again, if he got 5 or 6 All-Ireland medals.
I don't think it's the reason he moved, but
no.
I don't think he'd be thriving as much as we've seen him thrive before.
I wouldn't manage a lot of those players are particularly enjoying the way that they play football. Players.
Really?
Yeah, well, McCaffrey is a guy that has an engine on him that he can go from one end of the pitch to the other and burn past 10 players, but he doesn't do it all the time, and I think if he started doing it, he'd be whipped. I think they have to subscribe to Gavin's worldview, and they have to play the way he wants them to play, and that is a very disciplined, very measured and methodical approach to the game.
Yeah, it's very low risk, and I think Tyrone are going to be quite low risk on Sunday as well. And what happens when you get a low risk game?
0-0 draw. No, I don't. See, that's the Pat Spillane school of stuff here.
That is, you've gone full Pat Spillane.
Exactly. So as the week goes on, have you become more worried as a Dubs fan that there's something brewing, that Mickey Hart has some evil genius plan up his sleeve?
Yeah, because genuinely for 25 minutes in the semi-final, I thought Dublin were in big trouble. I thought it would be the day. I had the same sinking feeling I did against Donegal a few years previous, where you'd never see the end coming, and it will come so fast, it'll just pass you by, and it'll all be over before you've even known something was wrong. And I genuinely thought that they were in big trouble for the first 25 minutes. In the Galway game, yeah.
I didn't feel like they were in trouble. I felt like this is going to be an interesting match. But then Galway started kicking the ball into Cluxon's hands and kicking stupid wides and missing penalties, and you're like, oh, come on.
But the penalty goes in, and I think Dublin are in serious danger. And they were able to do so much at half time. They talk about how they're able to reorganise at half time. Fitzmaurice touched on it there. They used that time so effectively, and they did in previous years against Kerry in an All-Ireland semi-final, where Kerry pushed up on their kickouts and caused them real problems. And it was that half-time break that they managed to regroup and refocus and figure out what they needed to do properly. I would have serious concerns if it's not going their way after 20-25 minutes and they're struggling. I'm not quite sure how they'd approach it.
I think they need to be 8-2 down after 25 minutes for me to have any kind of sense that this might get interesting in the second half. And like in the second half, they need to be 5 points down with 10 minutes left to go. And I'd be like, okay, this is an interesting game now.
But a 5-point lead for Tyrone, in fairness, is huge. So if they get themselves, granted, can't believe I'm doing this where I'm talking myself into a contest here, but if Tyrone, happen to be lingering 1 or 2 points up, which teams can do quite early in the game, and then before half-time, bang, a goal, and they go in to break 5 points up, then we've got a game. Then we have one hell of a game because, as I say there, it's very, very hard to come back from 5 points down against any team like Tyrone. And like that is the one benefit of the school of thought that not much has changed.
I think Tyrone needs to score 3 goals to win this game, really. Like, I can't see them kicking 120 or 116 or any and winning with that score.
Well, as I said at the top of the show, 117 is going to be what Dublin kick and it'll win them the game.
People talk about the importance of Cluxton. I don't think that his powers are waning, but I do think he is a little bit more gaff prone than he has in recent years. I'm not sure whether that's concentration, whether that's
boredom.
Just getting bored. Yeah, but I mean, he was at fault for the first goal against Galway. He kind of came for it and left himself in no man's land. So I think that maybe they might actually, believe it or not, see one of Dublin's strongest points as a liability if you pump high balls in there and try and make it dangerous.
But even Fitzmaurice was saying that, like, down through the years, they realised through the video analysis, it sounds like that one-on-one those Dublin defenders are really good, that actually they match up very well. Like, Philly McMahon kind of would have broken even against Donaghy over the years, and you're thinking, well, like, Mayo had to sacrifice Aidan O'Shea to give themselves a sense of safety against Donaghy. You can just stick Philly, do your job, Philly, and keep coming forward and tire him out at the other end. Like, I don't know, I just think that the game is set up for Tyrone to
bring a surprise?
No. It's not. It feels to me like we're in the middle of a cycle where Dublin are cresting at the moment and they're getting better and better, and that last year's semi-final is actually the line that you draw, not the league game where, I think Dublin came back and scored a late goal and a point to draw that game against Tyrone.
I think you're getting mixed up with the Monaghan game in last year's league. Remember when Jack McCaffrey scored a very, very late goal up in Monaghan?
No, this is Croker.
Oh, right.
Was it not like...
Maybe they did. It was a draw anyway, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think Dublin definitely had to come from behind.
Did they? Right,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I don't recall that game.
Darren, rescue the situation here and tell us what's going on.
Yeah, to Nottingham Forest, and they scored twice in injury time to secure a dramatic 3-1 victory over Newcastle in the second round of the League Cup last night. Former Ireland international Daryl Murphy put the championship side ahead in the second minute. The game seemed destined to be settled by penalties before Solomon Rondon levelled in the 92nd. Forest found the front again through Matty Cash. He fired them ahead before Gil Diaz made it 3-1 in the 96th minute of that game. It's advantage Celtic heading into the Europa League playoff with Saduva tonight. They have the away goal going into the clash to tie level at 1-1 after the first game in Lithuania. The Hoops will have to plan without Lewis Morgan and Odson Edouard once again. The pair missed the first leg in Lithuania. Oliver Cham could return to the starting lineup, having been rested for the weekend following his goal last week. That game will kick off at 8 o'clock this evening. Liverpool could be drawn into a tough Champions League group later. They will be in pot 3 following Benfica's qualification for the group stages. If Basel and Benfica had failed to qualify, the Reds would have been in pot 2, where they could have avoided the likes of Borussia Dortmund, Porto, Shakhtar Donetsk, Benfica, Napoli or Roma. Man City, Man United and Tottenham also learn their fate when the draw takes place in Monaco at 5. While Sam Allardyce has had the majority of his complaints against the newspaper that cost him his job dismissed, he was the subject of a sting by the Daily Telegraph, who filmed him telling an undercover reporter supposing his businessman how they could possibly get around player transfer rules. The former England manager lodged 25 complaints about the story with the Independent Press Standards organisation in England. Ipso found in the paper's favour on 22 of those points. The report, though, came to the conclusion that the sting was justified and in the public interest, but also found on 3 counts that the paper had breached the editor's code on 3 specific points. Big Sam claiming victory despite losing the majority of his complaint, welcoming the ruling. He said, had the FA stuck to their word and waited to see the Telegraph's evidence, they would have found the allegations made against me were false. It was, of course, the allegations about third-party ownership that the FA stated were the reasons for my leaving the job. I will consider my position in this regard with my lawyers, but I hope FA Chief Executive Martin Glenn and Greg Clark, the FA Chairman, reflect on the lack of leadership they showed, not for the first time, or I expect the last.
Yeah, but they're delighted now because they've got Gareth Southgate instead of you as their manager. All's well that ends well as at first they think. How much did it cost them? They don't care.
And Big Sam still kicking the boot in there and leaving it in. Meanwhile, the Dublin manager Jim Gavin has dismissed the notion that the All-Ireland final may be a stinker. The former Dublin captain Alan Brogan issued a warning on Off the Ball last night that the game would likely be an ugly affair that would frustrate the fans. Jim Gavin's team bidding for a 4th All-Ireland in a row. Jim McGuinness made some interesting comments in the Irish Times as well last week. He said it could become very ugly. He wrote in his column, it might lead to a farcical and even notorious All-Ireland final. Gavin, having none of that when he arrived at his All-Ireland final press day, he was armed with notes, reams and reams of notes, and he was ready to dispel the notion that Tyrone are a bad football team.
Scored 7 goals and 44 points. So probably spoke in volumes to us how potent they are as an attacking team. Probably doesn't get enough airtime, but they are really impressive going forward. I mean, to score 17 goals over 10 games in the championship, I think any team will be very proud of that record, and the expectation that, rightly so, that their supporters have for them is justified. They have been very impressive. They've obviously learned a lot from their opening defeat against Monaghan, and that showed in the semi-final, the way they closed that game out. So any game that we've played in recent times, it's been the bounce of a ball. Even go back to 2013 in the National League final, Dean Rock came in to win that game for us by a point. So we've had some great challenges with them. They're a fantastic manager, fantastic management team. I see Mickey has the contract out to 2020, so he obviously sees something in this particular group of Tyrone players, and I think they've justified and paid that his faith in them back big time this year, and it's going to be a very close game.
Andy Murray's been knocked out of the US Open. He lost to Fernando Verdasco in the second round of the competition. The former world number one only returned in June after a year plagued by injury. He was playing in the first Grand Slam in 14 months, beaten in 4 sets in that match. Well, finally, Aaron Rodgers set to become the highest paid player in American football history. He signed a blockbuster 4-year contract worth $134 million. The quarterback gets $67 million between now and the end of the year, and a $13 million bonus on St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, 87 million between now and Paddy's Day. That's not a bad next 6 or 7 months for Aaron Rodgers. A reminder, OTBAM is live with Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products. Now, from one hyper-confident sports fan in Darren to another hyper-confident sports country, we're heading to New Zealand, where Chris Rattue is on the line to talk to us about how, well, we shouldn't actually bother having the Rugby World Cup next year. What we should do is just hand the trophy over to New Zealand right now. Morning, Chris.
Morning. How are you?
Yeah, so front page of the New Zealand Herald, it went absolutely worldwide because the difficulty is we can't really argue with it at the moment.
I was just trying to get your attention.
Yeah, Beauden Barrett is the best player the world has ever seen, and this team is playing rugby at a level that we haven't seen. Is the one caveat that we have in the rest of the world, the one bit of hope that we have, is that maybe, just maybe, they've peaked a year too early?
Yeah. Look, I'm trying not to sound arrogant. But I think the problem is they haven't peaked, and they're building a new way of playing there, and they've got the quality, with the attacking players. It's scary, some of the stuff that's appearing down here. Their outside backs have got so much skill. And I actually think they looked at the Lions series last year, which they drew, and that's, that's probably not what the All Blacks wanted in a series like that, and thought we got to up the ante a bit, and they're looking at, I think they're finding new ways of playing the game.
Is there anybody in the Southern Hemisphere at the moment who can actually challenge them, who can give them a test that is something that they haven't seen? Or is there a possibility that what's going on is that at the moment, Australia are at a really low ebb in their cycle, South Africa are making a bit of a recovery, but they're coming from such a low base that, it's hard to kind of say that they're the team that they will be when the World Cup rolls around. And that so the difference between them and the rest of the teams in the Southern Hemisphere is a bit more pronounced than it will be by this time 12 months.
Yeah, and I don't think Australia, if you're talking about the World Cup, I don't think Australia's got a chance. I just don't think they've got the power and the stamina to last the tournament. So in the last few years, the obvious significant problems the All Blacks have had are against Ireland. And there was one test against South Africa where the South African forwards really just ran over the top of them. So I think Ireland, England, South Africa, those are the dangers. But the problem with the All Blacks and playing the All Blacks is they only need a few minutes of their sort of excellence, and it rips teams apart. You can play very well against them for long periods, but if you're not on for the whole time, they just kill teams in minutes. And I've got to be honest. I see it almost getting worse for other teams.
Like you mentioned the Wallabies there, and one of the reasons why there's kind of this confidence around the Irish team at the moment is not just because of the Grand Slam win earlier this year, but it is because we went down to Australia and won a first Test series for decades and decades and decades in the Southern Hemisphere against Australia this June. So you're saying we shouldn't really be reading too much into that because Australia are crap?
No, I think the thing that Ireland has, maybe more than any other team, I think, is the ability to really contest the breakdowns against the All Blacks, and that's what you got to do. There's no other real way of stopping them. You have to slow them down, rip their ball away, contest virtually every breakdown and contest it hard. And I think of probably all the teams in World Rugby who can do that the best. I think maybe Ireland are the ones. But I just what the All Blacks are doing now, they're operating off turnovers, and what they're really getting good at is isolating players one-on-one, the matchups that they can win, and they've got such extreme talent with some of the athletes, and it's rather than struggling to find more of them, they're just coming out of the woodwork, and we're even getting some of the players in Australian Rugby League who have New Zealand links are putting up their hands, saying that they want to become All Blacks. And you're talking in a couple of cases here of guys of really extreme talent. There's a guy at Newcastle called Kalen Ponga who many people believe could develop into one of the Australian League greats. He's already put his hand up saying he wants to come to the All Blacks. So it's this sort of production line of extreme athleticism and talent, and what I think is happening at the moment is that the All Blacks are finding new ways of using it and using it to their advantage.
I'm reading your piece. You said the one thing that might possibly derail the All Blacks at the moment is the age profile and the injury profile of some of the other key players, and yet there does seem to be a strength in depth that will kind of perhaps ensure that isn't as damaging as it might be for a lesser talented squad or a squad that wasn't as deep. Who are the few players who are kind of maybe tilting in that direction of being a little bit too old or a little bit injury prone?
Well, I think, I don't believe that they have a really good pack, the All Blacks, but I don't believe they may have a better pack than certainly Ireland or South Africa. And I think if Malcolm Marx is on his game for South Africa and Matawera as well, I think South Africa can still give the All Blacks a lot of problems. If they were to lose some of their forwards, they could struggle, and they have a great upcoming hooker now in Cody Taylor, but there's a huge gap back to the next best. If Cody Taylor was to be hurt, they might have problems because Dane Coles, who was such a brilliant footballer in his prime, has had so many injury and concussion issues that no one down here feels that he will ever get back to his best. Kieran Reid is coming back, the great captain's come back from back surgery, and he's had his share of issues. And there are other selection areas, especially in the loose forwards, that aren't. Sam Cane has also just received another concussion. There's a lot of issues there that if they don't arise in the World Cup, they'll be okay. But I also believe that it could easily be derailed. Joe Moody, who's rising as a really outstanding loose head prop, has had another injury problem as well. So if you start to lose some of those, they could find it a bit tough in the forwards against the best teams, and then you can start to make headway against them. But they have a lot of cover for their brilliance in the backs.
It does sound, though, like it might not be time to jump the gun. It might not be time to hand over the William Webb Ellis Trophy right now.
I just thought I'd do it now, mate. No, I really do. I think at their best, I got to say, at their best, what I think's developing there, I just I can't see anyone beating them. I can't at the moment. And when you throw people like Rieko Ioane, the rising centres they've got, if you throw Sonny Bill Williams at his best back into the mix, and there's injury doubts about him, and they can now flood the field in the last 30 minutes with these guys that have so much extreme acceleration and stepping ability that they just rip the game open at the end. When you bring guys like Damien McKenzie, possibly Richie Mwanga on, they're just very hard to contain. And I know it's going to sound like arrogance over there. I accept that. I like to think that in the past, people like myself have called it when the All Blacks aren't going well, when we think other countries are going well. But I just see this team that's now rising as maybe taking the game to new levels.
So suddenly this game between Ireland and the All Blacks in November is a proper humdinger, like the best team in the Northern Hemisphere against the best team in the Southern Hemisphere. How big a level of a handicap would you put on that game at the moment? How many points do you expect New Zealand to win that match by?
Yeah, at the moment, I would think New Zealand will win it by 15 points. But it's funny that too, because there was so much emphasis on England when it was arranged, and really England have slipped away. And England, for its history, and this would be the pot calling the kettle black here, but a lot of people perceive English rugby to be quite arrogant. And I think of all the teams that the All Blacks play, New Zealanders hate to lose to England the most. It doesn't matter what state. It doesn't matter what state their game is in. So that will be a massive game. But I think it's now clear that Ireland's the big game on that tour, and it'll be a great matchup.
I dare say, Chris, that it's not a perception that the English are arrogant. It might be closer to fact.
I'm preaching to the converted.
And what about Eddie Jones? How is Eddie Jones perceived in New Zealand?
Very interestingly, when he got the job and started off so well, I think I did a few columns with him for a while, so I've had a little bit of contact with him, but not a lot. But there are people around who know Eddie a lot better than I do, and people like him. He's liked down here. But a lot of people who knew him and his history said to me that it won't last. The success won't last, and that's the history of Eddie Jones. And it's clear from the stories that have come out from England, he's an incredibly intense guy. Maybe that sort of intensity and obsessive sort of behaviour works for a while, but then it starts to wear thin. And there's been some sort of stories that are both sort of funny and telling that have come out of England, but, he's texting guys during club games and stuff, texting them at half time. There's players getting injured in training. You just get this feeling that the walls are closing in, and it's very, we're all in a way, we like to think we're in control of our personalities, but we are pretty much controlled by our own personalities. It's very difficult for an obsessive person to pull back. People might say, well, ease up a bit, find new ways of doing it. But if we are who we are, and I think the things that I was told about Eddie Jones and the predictions that people I know made about his reign in England are starting to come true in a way. That's what it's starting to look like.
Yeah, it looks like the countdown clock is on to, I don't know if he's actually going to make it as far as the World Cup. I was saying earlier on, in my mind it's 50-50. The November series is going to be very important, and if New Zealand absolutely annihilate England, which is a possibility that might happen at Twickenham, then you can see...
Who would come in, do you think? Who are the...
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I suspect that they would be looking for a short-term fix to take them through to the next World Cup. So somebody like an Eddie Jones figure would actually be perfect. Somebody who comes in and is short-term and says these are the strict rules that we're abiding by. But actually, I don't care. It's like that's the correct answer to that one. It took me a second to get there.
Yeah.
I do want to ask you about Steve Hansen, because after the Lions tour, he came in for a fair bit of criticism from the New Zealand media and whether or not he was actually the right man to take this team forward. Has he won everybody back over by the quality of what's happened in the meantime?
Yeah, it's hard to, some people just have a thing with the public and I think back to Graham Henry, he was sort of untouchable in many people's eyes, no matter what happened. I think people are still waiting. New Zealand judges rugby really harshly. It doesn't take much for a coach to fall foul of the public. I sometimes read the comments. For instance, we've gone through a period here where a lot of people have wanted Richie Mo'unga to get a start in the All Blacks. And for people who don't know Richie Mo'unga, he's the young, fast-stepping first 5'8" who's driven the Crusaders to a lot of success. And you read some of the comments and people talk about Steve Hansen protecting his boy Beauden Barrett and stuff like that. Comments that I would think are very harsh considering the level of rugby that Beauden Barrett has achieved. There's certain parochialism here. There's still that parochialism between, say, the people from Canterbury who have their favourite players, as opposed to the other areas who might attack the coach on those sort of grounds.
Yeah.
So that still exists here. But I think that there's just no, we're talking about Eddie Jones and maybe his future being in doubt. It's nothing like that here. And I think that one of Steve Hansen's his great strengths is that it's pretty clear that his voice still gets through to the players, just as the great managers in sport around the world. Like, to me, the greatest is Alex Ferguson, who was able to reinvent himself in a way through many different eras of football. He went from an era where he could grow a team from within Manchester United to an era where he had to buy players, and he could get through to all manner of players, from the greatest stars to the newcomers. And I think Steve Hansen, while it's a very different environment down here, rugby in New Zealand is heavily controlled by the New Zealand Rugby Union, who I refer to as the Kremlin. There's less. Players don't break ranks here.
Yeah.
It's like a sort of a secret society in a way. So it's easier for coaches in that respect. But still, we have seen coaches in the past who have lost their teams, and Steve Hansen seems to be able to keep reinventing himself and still get his messages through. And I think that's very impressive.
We're obviously very interested in Joe Schmidt's future relationship with New Zealand Rugby. Would he have to take a club job before he could be considered for the international job after the World Cup, if that was part of his thinking?
Well, I don't know if he had to, but I think the man's achieved so much that he shouldn't have to. For my money, he's the best coach in world rugby. And whereas what Steve Hansen has is a special ability to understand what makes New Zealand rugby players tick and how to make the All Blacks tick. But if you were to say who's the best coach in world rugby, I would say Joe Schmidt without a shadow of a doubt. And I think if New Zealand rugby is serious about getting the very best, then Joe Schmidt is the very best. And he would also take the All Blacks on another sort of reinvention, if you like. But how it works here is it's very in-house. Ian Foster's been the long-time deputy for Steve Hansen. I think he's favoured in the halls of power here, and most of the insiders here believe that it's a fait accompli that Ian Foster would get the job.
Chris, good stuff. Thanks very much for joining us this morning.
It's a pleasure.
Chris Rattue on the line from New Zealand, where they're polishing the William Webb Ellis and saying, no,
it ain't going
my
nowhere.
Precious.
Well, that's I like the Lord of the Rings reference there, given we were in New Zealand there speaking to that. Was that deliberate?
Yeah, of course, man. Thanks for pointing out the Captain.
You put a lot of thought. You put a lot of thought into your cultural references. So well done on that. Polishing it. They're going to be raging hot favourites. They're going to probably win it. No.
Yeah.
Like it's a probability rather than a suspicion. It's kind of like, it's maybe not on the level of the Dubs winning the All-Ireland, but it's close enough when it comes to probability, right?
Some comments on our Periscope feed this morning. A lot of people are continuing to ask us if this can just be a radio show because you're driving and you don't want to look at our ugly mugs. You just go on to offtheball.com and there's a big play button on the top, particularly on your phone, and then you should be able to run it through your sound system wherever you are, be that just your earphones if you're commuting or if you're driving through your wireless or whatever. Tom McKevitt says, remember 1982, nothing's black and white in sports. Exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. Remember 1982, bye.
I obviously don't remember it, but...
oh, you do.
Like, remembering it means you were there, there at the time.
Every child is born with a muscle memory in Kerry.
Like, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the...
Little dunt. There you go. A classic Irish sports moment.
Are you familiar with Assassin's Creed, the video game? There's a bunch of scientists who install certain memories into a modern day society, and in that case, we go back all the way to the Crusades, before Christ and all that. For Kerry people, you get installed with the memory of 1982. It's like you were born in 1994. Doesn't matter. You'll remember September whatever 1982.
That little lump behind your ear that every Kerry person
has. It's just a microchip that's installed in all Kerry hospitals. Well, big Kerry hospitals.
Thomas O'Keefe says, lads, you shouldn't waste this much time talking about a game that will be a non-event. I mean, what if the game is a non-event? What if Dublin come out and produce the absolute excellence that Kilkenny produced the day they beat Waterford? I remember coming out of that Waterford game thinking that was amazing. We've literally seen the greatest hurling team of all time reach perfection. Their first wide was 67 minutes in. Granted, Waterford didn't play well, didn't fulfill their potential, weren't the team that they could have been. But sometimes you do just have to go, that is magnificent. Brazil win a World Cup final 4-0 or 4-1 against the Italians in 1970, and it's pinnacle, high watermark, footage that will last forever.
Tiger Woods killing the field in, was it the British Open or was it the Masters in
Masters in 97.
97. That sort of stuff.
Where's Dave McIntyre when you need him?
When you need him. That's
12 strokes in 97, he was 1500 par, what the hell?
There's a thrill in that, for sure. And the thing is, it wouldn't be surprising. And obviously, the Kilkenny situation wasn't surprising at the time, but I guess there is an element of just being impressed by it all, and you just can't but be. I don't think do this Dublin team have that gear to absolutely annihilate Tyrone if they want to? Because that might actually be a thing that they have the capability to do it, and they just
the old team, the pre-Donegal, pre-Jim McGuinness smash and grab team, they had that.
Yes,
they absolutely had that.
I'm not sure if this Dublin team does
with Connolly, and maybe I don't know, maybe they don't. Oisin Stain says, I'm missing the duck hunting jacket already.
So am I, to be quite honest. I had to burn it last night after all the abuse I got.
Luke O'Reilly says, you should just worn it in again today and gone, yeah. What about it?
Double down.
Not even mention it.
Double down on the duck hunting.
If anybody missed it yesterday, Owen managed to spill a full cup of coffee on his shirt, and it stained to the point where he couldn't actually. Well, it was still wet when the show was starting, so he put on his duck hunting jacket. Then he took so much advice, or so much abuse, that we opened a poll to see what jersey we would force him to wear, and we ended up with the Mead 1988 jersey. And then yesterday, Owen said to me, "Why didn't you tell me that I looked so ridiculous in it? It looks like it went through the wash, but it was me who shrunk inside it."
Yeah, that's exactly
the duck
what
hunting
happens.
jacket from yesterday. Yeah.
Well, thanks a million for bringing that up. It's a terrible look. I think it's more, the black and navy combination there, which somebody correctly pointed out was just a fashion disaster and reputational damage on my part.
Luke O'Reilly says, take a shot every time Ger clears his throat. And Oisin Stain says, you'd be locked. Apologies for that. But I thought I was much better this morning, no?
I am pissed.
Only once. Do you lads give Tyrone a shout in the All-Ireland final? On the Mayo note, would Tony McEntee not have been an unreal candidate for the job, says Peter Burns. The man's an All-Ireland winning machine. Who knows where Tony McEntee is going to fetch up next. And so one more thing, a tweet from Arthur Lanigan O'Keefe. Nice to wake up this morning and find that you're number 2 in the world. So it's a good way to start his day. Ranked number 2 in the world.
Yeah, we've got a piece with Arthur Lanigan O'Keefe coming in the next few months. We spent a day out in the National Sports Campus with him before he took his holiday post-season, so we'll bring that to you on Off the Ball channels in the next few weeks.
Cool, good stuff. Now, one last thing. The Roadshow is on tonight. Jim McGuinness, James Horan, Cora Staunton, Aidan O'Shea, Kieran McGeeney, Keith Barr, Peter Canavan, all joining Joe at GAA HQ as we preview Dublin Tyrone. This is not live on the radio tonight. You have to have got a ticket. There might be some spares. Anyone buying or selling outside it, but as far as I know, it's pretty much sold out at this point. Maybe check out offtheball.com/events. No, it is sold out. Yeah, totally sold out for our Boyle Sports All-Ireland Football Final Roadshow in Croker. You are in for a treat tonight. Plenty of conversation, obviously, to be had for that one. The radio show goes on as normal. We'll be playing you a good hour of that on tomorrow's show, and then loads of All-Ireland preview on Saturday morning. An all-star lineup coming your direction on Saturday morning on our social channels for our Big Benetti Sports Special. I think that's going out around about 11 or half 11, but we'll give you details on it tomorrow. From 12:30 today across Off the Ball, the Keith Andrews Show. Kevin Kilban is going to join Keith in studio. Champions League draw, Manchester United, and they may well talk about Declan Rice and some of the suggestions about why it was that Declan Rice decided his future wasn't going to be part of the Ireland setup. Tomorrow morning on OTBAM, Sean Boylan, Mossy Quinn, Alan Quinlan, all joining Adrian Barry in studio from 7:45. Owen's going to be somewhere in a field outside Stradbally, losing an important part of his brain.
Jesus
Tonight on the radio, John Giles, Charlie Redmond and Seamus McCallan on the wireless. That is all the stuff that I need to tell you about. But before all that, we've been talking to the veteran voice of the Octagon, Bruce Buffer, about discovering his long-lost half-brother, Michael Buffer, Conor McGregor's Brooklyn Rampage, and much, much more. Have a look.
All right, we have a treat for you this morning. The official voice of the UFC Octagon, Bruce Buffer, is on the line. Bruce, you're very welcome to OTBAM. Thank you very much for taking the call.
My pleasure, Owen. Very, very much a pleasure to be on. Thank you.
A lot of people will recognise you. A lot of people will know who you currently are. But when we were chatting about this outside, when we knew you were going to come on the show, the first thing that struck me was how, first of all, you get into the game that you're in terms of being one of the most recognisable figures in the UFC. But initially, what was your relationship with combat sports? Do you have a history in it? Do you have a history in martial arts? And I think you've got a history in kickboxing.
Yeah, I have actually quite a long arm history. It even starts from when I came out of the womb. My dad was a huge boxing fan. My grandfather is Johnny Buff, who's in the history books, was the bantamweight flyweight boxing champion in 1921. And that's back when there were only 9 divisions and the best fought the best, sometimes fighting every 2 months, or even every month at times. So a different world back then. And my dad was a huge boxing fan, as I said. So I was watching boxing as a kid. Huge fan. I had the pleasure of meeting Muhammad Ali when he was Cassius Clay. Right. When I was 5 years old in Philadelphia, and I'll never forget it because my brother Brian and I were at a hotel with my father, and we noticed him. We recognized him from TV, and he could tell we were looking at him, and he came over and talked to us for like 5 minutes. And as a young child, that had a lasting effect on me even to today and in this period of my life, which is one of the reasons that we as UFC fighters and whatever I do, when fans come to us and ask for autographs or pictures, that one memory of me as a child is one of the key reasons why I'll spend an hour signing everybody's autograph needed and picture, because if it wasn't for the fans, we wouldn't be where we're at. We have to be role models and take care of the fans. So with that being said, I'm getting off subject here. I started in martial arts at 12. My first start was judo. I achieved a green belt, and then at 15, I moved from Philadelphia to Malibu, and I met Chuck Norris's fighting partners. Right. And I got into an art called Tang Soo Do, which is the Korean-style brother to Taekwondo. And that was Chuck Norris's style that he started in the Air Force. So I went on to do that for a number of years and also study in a variety of other arts. Achieved a second-degree black belt in Tang Soo Do. And then I fell in love with kickboxing because I wanted to, when I sparred, I didn't want to point spar and just hear Ippon. I wanted to fight. And I was, like a lot of us when we were younger, I had a lot of fights, of my own style, being a surfer and the territorialism and all the kind of stuff there. So if I was going to train, I wanted to fight for real. So I stayed in kickboxing for some 10 or 12 years, very heavily training and sparring every week. And I had to stop sparring because I suffered what my doctor thought was my second concussion. I was actually preparing to possibly have just one pro fight, just to say I did it, just to put it down, never to want to be a pro fighter. And I got concussed twice in training, and he told me to stop, no more. And I probably had a lot more concussions than that. I can't remember, but I was 32, and I actually started slurring my words when I got concussed, and had some effects. And he said, this is going to go away, but if you keep doing this, you're gonna suffer this in your later years. So just no more head trauma. And that's pretty much my experience, but I've trained ever since then. And it's something that I've just been in tune with. I love the martial arts.
That's incredible. That must have been a real body blow to you at the time, particularly given the bright lights and the money that might have come as a result of a professional career, to be told it's over before it even begins.
Yeah, but again, remember, I was 32. It wasn't an aspiration of mine to be a pro.
Sure.
It's like, you say, well, I'd like to climb that mountain one time and say I did it, right? So I just wanted to, there's a place called the Forum near where I live, and they were having Monday night fights, and they used to put on these 3 2-minute round kickboxing events. And at the time, I was starting to manage my brother Michael, and actually I was doing that for a few years. So I had an inroad to possibly be able to be booked for one of those situations, right? Or one of those bouts. And that's what I was training for. And, you got to make decisions in life. So it was just a little goal, but it wasn't going to go beyond that. It wasn't about the money. And quite frankly, there's never been any money in kickboxing as a sport like the kind of money that people earn, thank God, today in the mixed martial arts, which is something all of us have been fighting for, to make sure the fighters make as much money as possible. I want every fighter to make $1 million, millions of dollars. They deserve every single penny of it.
Yeah, they sure do. You mentioned Michael there. A lot of people will know that he's your half-brother. Talk to us about your relationship with Michael, particularly early in your life, because just reading before we came on here, you didn't even know the two of you were related until you were about 30 years old, I think.
Yeah, it was more like around 29 years old or whatever. Back in the 80s, when Mike Tyson was really getting popular in boxing, was the water cooler conversation on a Monday at the office, much like the UFC is today after big shows. There was Tyson, there was all these great boxers back then, and out came this very handsome, debonair, James Bondish looking individual who added a total new flair to ring announcing, to where we started paying more attention to the ring announcer. And then when he came on with his famous "Let's Get Ready to Rumble," I was a fan, but I was also questioning what was going on, because in my 20s, I owned what we call telemarketing companies, and this is before the internet. And as a natural thing, I looked in every phone book of every city in the United States. I used to have a library of them for my salespeople, right? So I never saw my last name, Buffer, in a phone book in any city in the United States. So here comes this man on TV, and on the screen it's Chiron Michael Buffer. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? We kind of look alike. We don't look alike. He's much handsome. He's a really handsome guy. This guy's a pretty boy. I'm like, nah, it can't be. So then I started searching around, and I realized that he grew up like 20 miles from where I did, in the area of Philadelphia. I called Don King's offices, the big promoter back then. I called other offices, and people started coming up to me and saying, "Hey, is that your brother? That guy that goes, 'Let's Get Ready to Rumble'?" And I go, No, my brother's Brian, who is my brother I grew up with. So now, long story cut short, about a year or so later, I'm driving with my father, and I'm in the car, and I explained to him, "Dad, that everybody's coming up to me. They're asking me who this guy is. We're watching him every week on boxing. Any idea?" And I got this. He's driving. "I think that's your brother." Wait, what are you talking about? And then my dad proceeded to tell me that he and my mom were married for 57 years before my dad passed away 10 years ago. And a loving, wonderful relationship. But my dad never told me he was married during World War II. When he was 20, he had a marriage that lasted 9 months. When he came back from overseas, a divorce ensued, but a child was born. And that child happened to turn out to be Michael Buffer. And Michael was doing a show in Los Angeles, and my dad called the arena and Michael to talk to Michael. And Michael called back, and they got together for lunch and got along famously. And therefore, Michael and I met. And at the time, he didn't have the famous 5-word phrase, "Let's Get Ready to Rumble" trademark. There wasn't a hat or a T-shirt made off it. And after traveling to a number of events and building our relationship as brothers and friends, I told him, I said, "Michael, I own 2 companies. I'm making great money, but I'm burned out. I don't care for what I do anymore." But I was at an event called, remember when Evander Holyfield fought Riddick Bowe? If you know your boxing, they fought twice. It was November 13th, 1992. See, I got this embedded in my head. I'm positive that's correct. And I was sitting there in the Thomas Mack Arena in Las Vegas, and amongst a sold-out crowd of whatever, 20,000 or less or more. And when Michael went into his Rumble, I had an epiphany, because here's Hulk Hogan and Jack Nicholson and all these celebrities and all these people. They're going nuts. And I said, something's got to be done here. This has to be trademarked. There's so much more you can do outside of boxing. So I basically got it with my brother, and in so many words said, "Michael, I believe I can make you richer and more famous than you ever dreamed. And the only way I can do that is I want to sell my 2 companies. I want to devote my entire time to being not only your manager and putting you in every form of sports and entertainment there is, because you're just incredible. But at the same time, we need to trademark this phrase. I want to make toys and video games and, all this stuff. And this was off the top of my head. That night of the fight, I went back to my room, and instead of going and playing blackjack and having fun in Vegas or whatever you people do, I literally wrote 3 pages incessantly of these ideas that kept coming out of my head. And I saved that paper, and it's in my safe somewhere. And that's what I said. I said, Michael, I want to do all this. He goes, how are you going to do it? I mean, it sounds great, Bruce, but how are you going to do it? I'm all for it. And I said, I really don't know. But if I'm going to give all this up, you better believe I'm going to make this happen. And lo and behold, the rest is, wonderful history and a great partnership between the 2 of us working together.
Yeah,
and that's much it. Yeah.
So he coins the phrase, and you make it famous, basically, is what I'm hearing there. So,
well, he coined the phrase, and let's say that he made it famous. I'm the man. I'm the man behind the rumble. I'm the sheriff of the rumble. I'm the marketer. I did all the. I do the deals, of course, going over everything with Michael and develop the different areas that Michael's been involved in over the years. That's what a manager does. So it's more of a shared effort, but it's Michael Buffer. He created it. So let's just say that Michael made it famous. If it wasn't for Michael, it wouldn't be what it is. And on my part, he wouldn't have done a lot of the stuff that he did.
Do you recall your first meeting with Michael? What was that like? Was there an awkwardness at all meeting somebody who's your half-brother after 30 years of being on the planet?
Absolutely, because there's 2 things. We met at a restaurant one night where my family was waiting at the table in this Italian restaurant. La Terrazza, I'll call it, Barrington and Welsh. I mean, all these things stand out in my head. I know exactly where it was. I know the time. When Michael walked in, remember, I've been watching him, and I don't get caught up in celebrities. I grew up in Malibu. I met a lot of celebrities over the years, and, we're all human, right? People impress me by the type of people they are, not just because they're on TV.
Sure.
So when Michael walked in, I was both a little starstruck because I was a fan. At the same time, this was my blood walking in, and it's a feeling in my body that I can't really explain. And I think unless you've been through that kind of a situation, there's no way to understand what it felt like. But it was pretty incredible. And I was just so happy that we all got along so well. And it started off so great. I mean, we're all one big loving family, and it's awesome. It really is.
Yeah, it's a great story. And ultimately, the brothers that you are kind of extends beyond the familial links that you share, because in your profession, you're both incredibly well-known people for doing what is essentially the exact same thing, just in 2 different sports. So was Michael an influence on you becoming the guy that we associate with getting the crowd hyped up around the Octagon and big UFC nights?
Say that last question again, please.
Was Michael, I guess an influence is what I'm trying to say. Was he an influence on you? Because obviously he was doing your role prior to you in the UFC.
Well, when I was yes, he was, of course, because when I was watching Michael before I ever stepped into a cage or a ring and announced for the first time, I was thinking, what a great job. I'm sure people say this about, me at times, and certainly say it about Michael. It's like, wow, how cool. You dress to the nines in a great tuxedo, you travel the world, you get a great seat to your favorite sport. I mean, how can you not love that? But Michael was an influence on me, except I had one goal in mind. And when I decided to step into the ring and then into the cage, because I announced a number of things before, and after I started with the UFC, I told myself that I gave myself 2 to 3 years. And I did not want to be Frank Sinatra Jr., right? And what I mean by that is I didn't want to go out there and ride the coattails and just be like Michael, stand in the center and be as eloquent as he is. Not that I couldn't assume that kind of a role to whatever level I could do it, but I'm a little different. If you notice when I announce, I have to move. I get very passionate when I'm announcing. I want to give these great warriors who are putting their blood, sweat, and tears on the octagon floor every ounce of passion I can give them to enhance that moment for them. And at the same time, enhance the experience for myself, announcing the way I want to announce. So I told myself if I didn't develop my own style, distinctive style, or start to within 2 to 3 years, that I was going to hang it up. And just, I didn't want to be just that guy earning a paycheck, standing center and reading a card. I wanted to have a certain identity that I was proud of for myself, as well as what I was putting out there as an image of what I was doing. And that was just a personal goal. Do you understand what I mean by that?
Yeah, It's really interesting actually listening to that, Bruce, because just hearing you do a few other interviews as well, you talk about how what you do in the Octagon is quite a natural thing, how you don't really practice your lines beforehand, you read what's in front of you and it's just there. Like, ultimately, the two most famous announcers in combat sports are both called Buffer. There must be something there. There must be something in the genes that makes you good at what you do. It's not a technical thing it's not a solely technical thing that makes you good at what you do. Do you agree with that at all, or is that not something you go along with?
No question. I absolutely agree with it, and I'll tell you why. Remember, Michael and I met. We did not grow up together, as you said. Met when I was 29, 30 years old. He was like around 43. I'm 61 now, and Michael's 72. And basically, our dad, Joseph Buffer, had a set of pipes on him that Michael will tell you to this day is the best pipes of all of us. Now, my dad was a Marine drill instructor. My dad was in the Marines for a period of 13 years, serving in World War II and Korea. And after Korea, he was a drill instructor at Camp Pendleton, amongst other things, Master Sergeant. And when I would walk in a room as a kid, I go, "Hi, Dad." He goes, "Son, project your voice. Let them know you're in the room," right? I'm like 8 years old. "Oh, okay, Dad. Okay, that's good. I'll do that." He just had this, this thing. And I was doing some motivational speaking and some other stuff before I ever stepped in to announce. And I have no problem being in front of a group of people. So with that kind of upbringing, Michael doing his thing, there has to be some hereditary factors to what we do, I'm sure.
Yeah. Like, you mentioned the movement in the ring there as well. Like, you both rely heavily on your voice, but you rely heavily on your movement, the 180 to the 360, whatever it may be. Is it true that you've caused yourself some injuries in the past doing this?
Well, yeah, but the injuries that I caused, I've blown 2 ACLs at UFC events. One ACL was during the actual fight night, which was when Jake Shields and the great George St. Pierre were fighting at the biggest UFC ever in Toronto, which had 55,000 people and sold out in like 20 minutes, right? It was the biggest show ever. Well, the week before, if you know from reading my interviews or maybe touching on my book, I love playing poker.
Yeah.
Poker's my favorite things to do. And I was in a poker tournament the week before. Now, this is going to be crazy, right? You would think I would hurt myself doing something physical. During the poker, we had a break, and when I'm walking through the casino, there was a dip in the carpet, and I hit it, and my ankle rolled.
No way.
Yeah. So it swelled up. I finished the day of poker. The next morning, it was like a football. So I ran to the emergency hospital. They drained a bunch of blood out of it. I went back to the poker tournament, played all day, wound up taking 3rd place, winning a very nice sum of money. And that's great, but I couldn't walk. And we were 6 days away from the biggest UFC in history. The Thursday before the show, I still couldn't walk. I started to stand up, and I was able to, start moving around. By the time I got to Toronto that night, the adrenaline took over. Every fight went great. I jumped, I spun, I did everything. The final fight with George St. Pierre, when George walked out, I said, "George, rush." And then George lunged out, which he always does. And I bunny hopped back when George does that, which I've always done, like a little bunny hop back a foot, right? When I landed that bad ankle, it didn't land firm.
Oh, no.
Wobbled. And when it wobbled, my whole knee exploded, right?
Oh, shit.
The ACL just blew right there. You can watch it. If you watch the tape, you'll see, because when I walked over to Herb Dean after it blew, and when it blew, it was so funny because, I say it's funny now, but I went, "George, rush," pop. You heard that pop. I go, "Pierre!" I gave like the loudest ounce of Pierre I could give, which was partial pain and partial vocalism, right? so then luckily I didn't fall. And when I put my microphone under Herb Dean's arm, I could feel my knee going back and forth like this, right? So I hopped out. You'll see me hop out on one leg, basically. And then I got out. John McCarthy looks at me and goes, "Buff, I think you just blew your ACL." I go, "Really?" And then Stitch Duran, the famous Stitch man, came, put an ice bag on my knee. What's wrong with that picture? I'm an announcer, okay? And I'm sitting on the side of the octagon with an ice bag on my knee while 2 great warriors are doing what they do best in the octagon.
Yeah.
Little different picture. The other time I was at 2 years ago, the UFC asked me to do this is a lip syncing contest, right? So I went out and I picked Rebel Yell by well, you know who I mean. Rebel Yell. Who did Rebel Yell? Escaping me real quick.
It's escaping. I'm not going to be able to help you out here, Bruce. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. It's a famous song. So anyway, at the beginning of it, he jumps, and so when
Billy
I
Idol.
Yes, Billy Idol. So then I do a little jump, and when I jumped, I had I changed my shoe from a street shoe into a athletic shoe, and I had a street sock on. So when I did the little tiny jump, it came down and my foot slipped in the shoe, and it was a pretty poorly developed stage. It was in sections. My knee buckled. I felt that same pop and you can watch it on the internet. I don't watch it anymore. I get a little nauseous.
I'm going straight there after this.
Just go Bruce Buffer blows knee at lip sync contest. It's right there. So I felt the pop, and then it gave way twice, and 45 seconds or so in, I fall, right? Because the leg just gave way. But I still kept lip syncing on the ground, and then I got up, and I finished the 3-minute rendition of the song, even did a guitar solo at the end. And then I sat down. I went the next morning to get an MRI in Vegas. This is the time there were 3 UFCs, one day.
Yeah.
The doctor said, well, you severed your ACL. It's gone. We need you to rest and just stay light on your feet for 4 days. And I go, no, I can't. So I went out and I announced the 3 shows with one leg. And why? And I didn't have a brace on the first show. They brought me a brace about 8 fights into the show, which you'll see I put on the outside of my pant leg on that show. Again, I did the 3 shows because there's one rule, guys. I've done the show with 100 and plus temperature, blown out back, blown out knee, God knows how many other things and travel, but I'm not fighting, okay? I'm announcing. I'm not fighting. These guys are putting it all, and the males and females are putting their lives on the line. I can get through a night of announcing with one leg. That's what I told myself. So.
It's one of the perks of being able to rely on your lungs, but that you can depend on one leg. Before we let you go, we're just stuck for a small bit of time, Bruce. I have to ask you about the big fight.
I'll give you as much time as you want. I've got 15 minutes. You take whatever you want.
I think it's more on our end. I think there's some GAA chat, some Gaelic games about to be recorded in this studio, Bruce.
Yeah. Gotcha.
So it's on our end. Apologies, but Conor McGregor against Khabib Nurmagomedov. It's only 6 weeks away, 5 weeks perhaps at this point. A quick prediction here: how's it going to go? Is this potentially the best fighter that Conor McGregor has ever come up against?
Well, on paper, I would say so. I mean, Conor's fought some amazing fighters in the UFC, and Conor's career is awesome. So with Khabib coming in. Khabib's a monster. We know that. On the ground, he's a monster. He's an undefeated fighter. It's going to be a war, and it's all about may the best man win. The one big thing that Khabib, in my opinion, has got to watch out for is that right hand of Conor's, that piston he has for a right hand. And a piston, what I mean is, boom. For that first 2 rounds of that fight, because that right hand of Conor's can put down an elephant. He's got amazing power in it. That's the key thing that Khabib's got to stay away from. As Conor, I don't think wants to initially go to the ground with Khabib. So Conor's great at using his distance. He's great at creating distance. He's great when he wants to hit something, his hand-eye coordination, his hand-to-foot coordination. He usually hits everything he goes for, but he works on his distance. And the way he plants and turns his body into his punches and his kicks, he hits with tremendous power. So if he can keep a distance on Khabib, then that could be a long night for Khabib.
Sure.
Right? If Khabib gets Conor down on the ground initially and Conor's sprawl does not negate that takedown, it could be a long night for Conor. So I never designate or say who's going to win. My attitude is always may the best man or woman win because I like to introduce everybody equally. I never bet on fights. I just, I'll analyze them based on what I see on paper. But it's going to be a great night. We're all looking forward to it. We've been waiting for this fight for a long time.
Oh, we sure have. And we're also looking forward to the hype to really kick in because, around Conor McGregor, you can call it a circus or whatever it is. We're all going to pay attention. We're all going to watch the press conferences just as closely as we're going to watch the fight. And I'm not sure, like we mentioned before you went on air, that you've been over here a few times. And like the Irish public is kind of like the worldwide public when it comes to their view of Conor McGregor. There are mixed emotions towards him, mixed opinions. He is like Marmite, as we say over here. Some people love him, some people hate him. And I do think what happened in Brooklyn earlier on this year has kind of swayed a little bit more in terms of public opinion against Conor McGregor. And that's kind of all around the world. And I'm not sure about you, but does it leave a little bit of a sour taste that the Brooklyn incident, the footage from that day in the Barclays Arena, is being used to promote this very fight when it is the very thing that kind of threatens to disrupt the purity that we often see in the UFC?
Marketing minds at the UFC who put this stuff together, these promos and these commercials, there's a reason, a method to their madness, shall we say, as the term goes. Obviously, being being a person of class and respect and everything that I lead my life with, it was very upsetting, that incident. And I went public and talked about it when I was asked by TMZ and such. What I'm hoping for is that, the UFC is going to do whatever they want to do to promote the fight. And the fact that you mentioned, too, that there's a split of fandom in Ireland a little bit since that incident with Conor, is, I gather, what you said?
Yes. Yeah, even before that incident, to be honest with you, Bruce.
I think a lot of that maybe stemmed from the way Conor handled himself at the Mayweather press conferences, which started that feeling. Because I was hearing this from Irish fans.
No, you're right.
Travels. And then it culminated into the horrific incident at Barclays. But, Conor went to court. They gave him the sentence they gave him, the justice that they laid down, which means, like anybody, he's served, he's paying his penance, shall we say.
Sure.
So now it's on to fight and everything else. Your question is about the promo being used. I was a little surprised, but, again, you've got half the people that want to see Conor win. You've got the other half, let's say, that want to see him lose for the reasons that we're discussing or whatever reasons, which means that everybody's going to buy the pay-per-view. That's the bottom line. I just hope that Conor, being the great warrior that he is, having the incredible backstory that he has, which I was hoping would make him one of the greatest role models in history to the young people out there watching him and everything, handling himself in a proper fashion. Let's just hope that Conor learns whatever he needs to learn from the incident that took place and becomes a better and a greater role model as Conor McGregor, being the worldwide personality and popular personality is. With fame comes responsibility and greatness. With greatness comes responsibility, as they say. Yeah. And that responsibility, I think, is to be a good role model for those of you watching. But Conor McGregor is going to be who he is, which is Conor McGregor. He's not going to be who he believes he is. He's going to stick to that mold. So I just hope he's learned from it and becomes an even better person than he already is the best way I can put it.
Yeah, well said, well put, Bruce. Listen, there's so much more we'd love to chat to you about, but we are unfortunately out of time. Bruce Buffer, it's been fantastic having you on. Thanks a million for taking the call.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to invite everybody. I do a lot of recordings for weddings and birthdays and championship introductions that many of the fans from Ireland, order for me through my website, brucebuffer.com. I really want to thank everybody because your thank you notes you're sending in, my partner and I, it's actually Kristen, she does all the work. And it's like, sometimes I get tears in my eyes with some of these thank yous. It's amazing. I'm so happy to do this for the fans.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if we can get a quick taster. If you could say you're watching Off the Ball.
Hi, this is Bruce Buffer, and you're watching Off the Ball. Cheers.
That was amazing. That's a dream come true right there, Bruce. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you. You know what? Thank you. I love your set. You do a great job. This is what makes our sport and the other sports that you promote who we are today. It's people like you and the fans, and I just want to thank you. I've been in this game a long time, and you're a class act, and I want to thank you very much for having me on your show.
No, thank you. Thanks a million, and great Dr. No Poster. We'll chat to you soon, Bruce.
Oh, thank you. Cheers, mate. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
OTB AM.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products.